A very warm welcome. Hello and welcome to this very special event in these beautiful surroundings in Queen's University, Belfast. In terms of some housekeeping, just to begin, you can all ensure that your mobile phones are switched off or on silent, and myself included. And the closest toilets that we have are in the Great Hall if you need to use the loo. So we're here to both celebrate and reflect on reaching 250 years of modern languages being taught in universities in Ireland, leading the way globally in this, and I'm delighted to say we have at least two of the 1776 chairs from Trinity with us today. So while this is both a celebration and a reflection, it's also about finding ways to future-proof modern languages in higher education, because the benefits are well documented, but there's no doubt there are considerable challenges which we will be discussing as the afternoon progresses. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Clark. I'm a reporter and a presenter for UTV, the most watched television news output in Northern Ireland and actually regionally in all of the UK. We have the highest audience figures, so my boss will be very pleased with me that I've had the opportunity to plug this here in Queen's. I am also a former student of law with French here at Queen's, taught by the wonderful Professor Janice Carruthers. We reconnected recently, and hence why she approached me to chair this event. I did jest as long as I wasn't required to compare in French, which would have been a stretch. But in all seriousness, I still understand, I still read and listen to French for pleasure when I get a chance, when I'm not working or with three children. But speaking it, j'ai perdu la main, meaning I've lost my touch, but so you'll forgive me, this will be in English. I graduated in 2002 in a 4-year degree with an Erasmus year at the University of Dijon. I did a postgrad in journalism at Ulster University. I'm afraid to say that's not an offering that Queen's has yet, perhaps. I worked with the Irish News, with BBC Radio Ulster as a freelance, and secured a staff job back as a radio reporter in UTV's newly launched radio station, U105. And that's almost 20 years ago now, so worked my way up to the current role as one of the main anchors for UTV Live at 6, our flagship show. So while I don't and I haven't had to use French directly in my career in a long time, there's no doubt in my mind that it has been hugely beneficial in preparing me and supporting me as a communicator, which is basically now what I do for a living. Anyway, enough about me. That was just to provide some context as to why I'm here. And I suppose also reflecting on this as a parent of small children, well, 2 are not small anymore. They're embarking on their modern language journey, really. So it's one I'll be encouraging them to pursue. And I, as a parent now, am invested in finding ways to support and sustain what was really a big part of my younger life, and really a love of my younger life. And perhaps I'll be able to rekindle that at some stage in the future. But enough from me to kick off proceedings, and without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Professor Ian Greer, the Vice-Chancellor of Queen's University Belfast. Professor Greer.
Well, thank you, Sarah. What a splendid example of the value of languages and the impact that it's had in your career already. So, good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to Queen's for this event, an event that looks towards 250 years of modern languages at third level on the island of Ireland, hosted in partnership, of course, with the Royal Irish Academy. We're really delighted to host the second event in this series of 4. I think the next one is due to be in Limerick in 2025, and the fourth and final one at Trinity College Dublin in 2026, which marks the anniversary of the first chairs of languages. Now, languages, as you all know, are the very foundations of communication, culture, and global connection. They enable us to connect with others, share our ideas, build relationships, preserve our heritage, our identity, our history. Languages are cornerstone disciplines for the arts and humanities. With a distinguished history on this island, it was back in 1776 that the first positions in the university world were created in Trinity College Dublin, with French, German, Italian and Spanish all having particular support. And here at Queen's, we've taught modern languages since 1849, initially with the Chair of Modern Languages and the Chair of Celtic Languages. As you've heard from Sarah, languages are inherently multidisciplinary, equipping students with practical skills, cultural insight and global awareness. And they're a gateway, a really good gateway to understanding histories and societies. Last year, many students from Queen's who are undertaking a languages degree had the opportunity to spend time abroad, either in working or in study placement, and I think that's invaluable. We no longer have quite the same access to Erasmus, but I think it's really important that universities continue to push forward with these opportunities for our students, not just in modern languages, but across our offering, because it is so valuable to spend time in another country and another culture. So language and internationalisation go hand in hand. At Queen's, we believe that equipping our staff and our students with linguistic and intercultural skills is really vital to build international partnerships, whether that's in academia, business, or even areas such as tourism. At Queen's, we're very proud to be ranked 6th in the world for international outreach, with over 25,000 students and 4,000 staff from over 90 countries. So universities like us really must provide options to encourage the uptake of language learning. And we take great pride in offering a wide range of opportunities, and in particular languages in combination with other areas such as law, international business, or science. It doesn't just stop there though, because we provide opportunities for our students, our staff, and importantly members of the public to learn a language through our Language Centre and through our Open Language programme. We really value linguistic diversity amongst our staff, amongst our students, because that recognises the crucial role that language diversity plays in bringing communities together. And of course, that approach doesn't just start when people come to university. It really starts right back in school. And I think it's really important that we recognise the value and indeed the crucial role that our schools here in Northern Ireland play in nurturing the next generation of linguists, inspiring students and hoping that they'll go on to pursue studies in languages, perhaps not alone, but often in combination. Finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of our participants in these discussions, including Peter McReynolds, MLA, Queen's language students, Alexandra Stafford-Santana, Hannah Wilson and Moira Koch-Wahana. And I offer a special thanks to Dr. Gisela Alter, the chair of the working group, and at Queen's to Professors Janice Carruthers and Isabel Torres. I also extend my gratitude to our colleagues in the Faculty of Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences, especially Margaret Fitzsimons, Sharon Woody and Jill Gray, who've helped to organise this fantastic event alongside the Academy. Queen's is really proud to be at the very forefront of language education, celebrating the importance of linguistic diversity and the global connections that brings. As we look ahead to the next 250 years of modern languages in this island, we as a university remain absolutely committed to supporting a multilingual and inclusive community, equipping our staff and our students, and the public indeed, with the skills they need to thrive in an interconnected world. So thank you all for listening to me. More importantly, I wish you every success with the discussions today, and perhaps more importantly, to the future success of linguistic diversity on this island. Thank you very much indeed.
Professor Gray, for those insights. Very important that you be here with me on this. So our first discussion this afternoon is entitled Pipelines, Policy and Programmes. Joining me for that, we have Professor Emma Keeley, University of Leeds and President of University Council Languages. Eugene Farrell, Deputy Secretary for Education Policy and Children's Services from the Department of Education here in Northern Ireland. We have Deborah McLaughlin, the Principal of Our Lady of St Patrick's College, Knock. Diarmuid Goodreader, the Principal of Gaelic Lushchester, and Hilary Woods, the Principal of Belfast Royal Academy, and Peter McReynolds, the Alliance Party MLA for Belfast East, who is going to open our discussion with his thoughts, and he's going to take to the podium. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah. So good afternoon, everybody. It's a real privilege to be here today. I mean, I was saying just before we came in, And this all came around after I met two random German teachers on a boat with the German ambassador, and randomly found out that the best person to speak to about language policy in Northern Ireland is Janice Carruthers. And I said, Janice taught me French and linguistics. And from there, it's led to being here today. So really delighted to be here. Thank you, Ian, and certainly thank you, Janice, as well. My language journey began back in 1998 when I was a first year at St. Malachy's College. And it was probably a bit of a bumpy start for me, not as good as Sarah's. First year, really quite struggled with the present tense, didn't really like conjugating verbs. I think second, third year, I think one of my teachers said at one time, tries hard, but could try a hell of a lot harder. But then it was in my fourth and fifth year learning French that I got a teacher, Mr. Burns, and I was saying outside that he always reminded me of Mr. Chips in the film Goodbye, Mr. Chips. So really loved making people conjugate verbs, but actually really care about us on a deeper level. And it was because of Mr. Burns that everything changed for me with languages. Having a good teacher there really led me to consider, well, keeping it on for GCSE, but about AS level and A2 as well. And ironically, I studied AS level politics, and I remember getting a C and thought, oh, sure, it's just an AS level, I'll drop it, I'll crack on with A2, sure, I'm never going to go into a career in politics anyway. But if only Peter then knew what Peter now has to do on a daily basis. So from there, I went to Queen's, where I did French and linguistics. And because of my year out in Grenoble, which my wife tells me I talk about, it was 2 weeks ago, but it's about 15 years ago now, I think. Because of that, I came back, and everybody who was in third year was actually a year younger than me. That's where I met my now wife. So actually studying French linguistics in Queen's led to, on one hand, my career now, I would say, as an MLA, also my marriage, and speaking with you today. But I think, and whenever Janice asked me to speak at this, I was brainstorming what I was going to say today. I think on a deeper level, I can just owe it all back to that Mr. Burns in fourth year that kind of activated me in a way that other teachers maybe had tried, but it wasn't clicking at that point. I think good teaching, making what is a very difficult subject, and French is one of the hardest languages, but making young people at that point who are distracted by lots of other different shiny things, activating them, making it digestible, accessible, and sort of relevant to them has led to so many different opportunities for me now. So when I was reflecting, I thought, how do we support Peter back then, now in 2024? We're in a very different place. So I was speaking with a number of people about the real sort of policy changes that need to be made, and learned about there's an OFQUAL report from 2020. Now I think in England they looked at language teaching, and actually languages were being marked too harshly back then. So they made those various changes, because if you're 16 years old, certainly Peter McReynolds at 16 years old isn't thinking, oh, I'm going to study that subject and I might end up getting a C or a D. So they had to refine that a little bit. The report in Northern Ireland was never published, so I'm constantly pressing the minister on this, trying to find out where it is, because unfortunately so many times in Northern Ireland it comes back to challenging that political machine to try to get those recommendations out there. England is cracking on. Northern Ireland is still waiting for that report to be published. And I think that's really important, because if people aren't studying languages, we're not getting those teachers like Mr. Burns, those good teachers. It's not just people wanting to study a language to be a translator or work in media in France or Spain. It's actually people who want to teach it as well. But if we're losing those minds, it's going to have an impact on the students. A phrase that I always use when I was Deputy Lord Mayor, someone said, in Northern Ireland we've learned to normalise the abnormal, and I think we need to normalise language teaching at a primary school level. Peter, in first year on reflection, actually probably didn't like learning languages because he'd never experienced it really before. So if you have primary school kids who are around French, Spanish, German, whatever it may be, it's normal, it's more normal for them, and it means that it'll be a positive for them hopefully later in life. And I think that's especially important, as I said to Janice when we were chatting about this recently. Everyone in politics talks about the end of Brexit. Brexit's done, thankfully. The Windsor Framework's in, and with so many opportunities, dual market access. And I remember someone in Northern Ireland Water saying to me once, everyone's talking about these business opportunities, but if people come here and they can't connect to the water, well, how's that going to work out? actually at the same time, if foreign companies are coming to Northern Ireland for dual market access, and none of us speak French or German or Spanish, that initial conversation that we get to have to build that relationship, it's out the window straight away, because languages, we're just expecting them to do everything for us. Actually, in terms of diplomacy, in terms of reaching out to people, in terms of building that relationship, it's one of the first things that you can do. Speak to them in their own language. So hopefully today we're going to hear a lot about challenges, and hopefully we're going to hear a lot about solutions as well. Really delighted to be here, and thank you very much.
Indeed, Peter, very enjoyed that and hearing about Mr. Enough to me about the Simpsons when you were, but clearly was more of a striking character than Mr. Murphy. Yeah. So yes, I'd like to ask you all, and obviously respond a bit, I guess, to what Peter said, and equally your own opening thoughts and observations. Happy for you to do it here while we're seated, or at the podium if you prefer, just for some thoughts. I don't know who would like to begin. Emma, perhaps, would you like to? Sure. Do you want to do it, Emma?
There's a microphone
sit
here.
there, or alternatively, you can use the podium if you prefer. Okay.
Right, is that
I think you could reintroduce yourself, because people may not have picked up getting what I told you were.
Thank you. Yes, I just have to work out how near to my mouth I need to put this. So my name is Emma Cayley, and I'm here in my capacity as Chair or President of the University Council for Languages. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me to this sort of august hall, and very, very sort of energised to hear all of the positive things about languages that we've heard so far. So just to explain a little bit about the University Council for Languages, which I think might not be that well known as an organisation. Essentially, it's a UK-wide body which advocates for languages and cultures at HE or third level across England and the devolved administrations. We make the case for languages and cultures with university senior management. Obviously, we perhaps don't need to at Queen's Belfast. It was extremely encouraging to hear what Professor Greer was saying at the beginning there about the support for languages that you have here. So we make the case with university senior management, we work with government in terms of policy asks, and we provide information, data and toolkits to colleagues working across the sector, particularly colleagues who are experiencing difficulty in their own institutions with possible contractions, threat of redundancy and so on, which unfortunately is increasingly the case. Just in terms of my own sort of experience to do this role, I've twice been a head of languages, not always a happy place to be. I worked at the University of Exeter for 16 years, where I was head of a Department of Languages for 5, and then I moved to the University of Leeds in 2019, conveniently just before COVID, and I've taken on that role as head of school there for 5.5 years, and still going, just because I'm quite passionate about languages. So my own educational background, I was very privileged to be able to study classical languages, Latin and Ancient Greek at GCSE and A-level alongside French. So I would say I'm a bit of a hybrid between a classicist and a modern linguist. And then I went on to do a French and Latin degree, and I sort of migrated a bit to teaching in medieval French. I'm mainly a literary studies person. So as I say, I'm a passionate advocate for the benefits of languages. And just in terms of some of those benefits, of course, we turn out, or we hope to turn out, students who are highly employable, and our subjects contribute fundamentally to enriching the lives of those who live and work across the UK and elsewhere. Obviously, as you all know, languages have measurable impact, so that's societal, cultural, economic impact, and can address global challenges. Obviously, some of those challenges that we're facing at the moment in the UK, particularly in the HE sector, falling numbers of students, I would say that the interest in languages, in our subjects, is not falling, however, but there's a certain kind of rhetoric that's driving student decline, and of course, as we all know, a broken pipeline from schools to HE, which hopefully we can talk about a little bit more in the discussion here. Obviously at HE level, as I was mentioning, a number of contractions and closures are accelerating now at an alarming rate, and we see that a lot in my organisation. As I say, we often help colleagues who are finding themselves in difficulty. In terms of support and what we can do, UCFL recently produced a 10-point plan. Obviously it has to be 10 points, a 10-point plan for ensuring support for modern languages. I'm not going to go through all 10 points, you'd be glad to know, but just some of them include developing a powerful narrative around the importance of modern languages, which is one of the things that we're here today to do, and coming to a shared understanding of our disciplinary field. Also, the real importance of emphasising domestic multilingualism, so what we might call HHC languages, and I know Janice in particular is working very hard on those, home, heritage and community languages, and recognising that we're already a multilingual society. And then acting jointly with teachers is very important to address recruitment and pipeline issues, and supporting the educational sector as a whole on in all four devolved administrations, and also engaging with policymakers. So I'm just going to leave my intro there and shall I pass the microphone along?
Absolutely, great to hear such a passionate advocate for languages, and interesting that the interest is falling. There are obviously other problems and challenges that need to be addressed. Yes, that's great. Lindsay, you would like to either you introduce yourself from seated, or you can begin with volunteers.
Thank you, Sarah, and lovely to be here. As Sarah had said at the beginning, my name is Lindsay Farrell. I'm one of the Deputy Permanent Secretaries at the Department of Education. I've been there since October 2021. Prior to that, I'd been in the Executive Office for 18 years, working in what I only thought were difficult issues, like good relations and reconciliation and tackling paramilitarism. I think it's since I've joined education, I've realised really what difficult issues look like. So I'm really delighted to be here. In terms of my own personal journey with languages, it's actually scary how similar my story is to Sarah's, actually, in so many ways. I too was a student here at Queen's, so it's lovely to be back. I studied law with Spanish, but I only carried Spanish to the end of first year just due to personal circumstances. I changed to straight law after first year, but I think I was probably the last person in my school. I went to Banbridge Academy, who was allowed to do 3 languages at GCSE and single award science, and I was absolutely delighted. I had the great privilege of studying French, Spanish and German. Then at A-level I studied Spanish and German for professional use, and carried Spanish on into the first year of university. And it isn't lost on me that whilst I haven't really used them transactionally since then, the great amount that I have benefited from in terms of having studied languages, and those skills that I truly believe you acquire through studying languages. And I had the great honour of being involved in this event, the first one in the series in Dublin. And I said then, and I'll say it again now, I don't think there's ever a time when we need empathy and communication skills more than now. And so I truly believe that languages are a huge mechanism for achieving that in our society. And I've seen that as I've gone throughout my career in the civil service. So whilst now I actually have responsibility for many of the issues that we will pick up on this afternoon, in my role in the Executive Office, I saw the power of language, both for good and for ill, to be honest. But that sense of when so many people came here from other countries seeking refuge, what it meant to those people to have their language acknowledged and understood and to be communicated with. And I saw that when I was responsible for racial equality in the Executive Office. In my current role now in education, I am responsible for a range of areas, including curriculum policy, the review of our existing curriculum, qualifications, and the programme of qualifications reform, 14 to 19 pathways, and the whole tackling educational disadvantage agenda, as well as teacher education. I think it was Peter that pointed to the value of a brilliant teacher and the difference to lives that brilliant teachers make. And often they can make the difference between the choices you make and the pathways you follow. And so I'm also responsible for teacher education and teacher professional learning. So whilst there are so many challenges that I'm sure we'll explore further this afternoon, I truly believe there are so many opportunities at this time in education as well. And just before I close off, like Sarah as well, I also have 3 children. My oldest has just gone to big school, and she is starting her journey with languages. For me, it's a terrible pity that is the first real formal opportunity. She had some exposure in primary school, but I'm delighted to see her coming home every day. Her favourite teacher is her French teacher. Her favourite subject is French, and she's animated and she's excited. And I think there's a real opportunity for us to build from where we're at. So it is such a pleasure for me to now see my children go on that journey, and I hope they will love languages as much as I do. So I think my role is to create the conditions and the foundations that we can build from to make sure that that's not an exception, but it's much more commonplace. And just before I hand over to Deborah, I'd like to pass on the apologies of our Minister, Minister Given. Unfortunately, you have a poor substitute in me today, but he does send his apologies, and he would have liked to be here, but I'm here in his place, so thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, mic trouble there. I think that'd be something that I would have some control over, but not, no. Yes, and thanks Lindsay for that, and the transferable skills that you speak of, which are, probably emphasise more, I guess. And also that your daughter now is clearly, she's got her love of languages from her mum. So thank you very much for that. And yes, now Deborah McLaughlin, would you like to use the podium? Absolutely. And the mic there should be. Thank you.
I feel like I was back in junior French and I was about to just ask, may I go to the bathroom there so that I could use the podium. So good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Sarah. I have been asked to give just some background information to start. So I was appointed principal of Our Lady in St Patrick's College Knock, which is a diocesan grammar school in East Belfast in 2018. And my own experience of languages was French, Spanish and Latin for A-level at Thornhill College, and then a joint degree in French and Spanish from this fine institution in 1994, followed by a PGCE the next year. I always thought that I was going to be a teacher. I always knew that I wanted to teach, and teaching modern languages I thought at the time added a certain je ne sais quoi. And I taught A-level French then in Knock from 1995 until 2018 with Spanish to GCSE level. From my perspective, the benefit of studying languages are unparalleled. A few weeks ago, I received a very timely email from a past pupil that I would like to share with you all here today. And she starts with, "Hey miss." Okay, that's how they referred to me at the time. It said, "Una here, and I hope you remember me from French circa 2010. I'm currently working as an emergency department doctor in a major trauma centre in Australia. And in the past month, I've been able to translate for 2 separate French patients who have been under our care following traumatic accidents. Being able to communicate with them in their own language was amazing for both them and for us as a team in an emergency situation when interpreters aren't readily available. They both told me I did an excellent job, smiley face after that, and I just thought that you would like to know that my French still comes in handy, and it was such a lovely, lovely email to receive. So as an educator and as an employer, the value of languages for me are clear. For example, what other subject teaches you to research, to present, to speak, listen, comprehend, summarise, be really, really picky when it comes to proofreading, translate into English, translate into French, and then study films and texts to an exceptionally high standard, discussing, analysing and evaluating various themes. And in this case, it teaches you to help others and it helps you to save lives. So the two key challenging issues in my role as principal with regards to languages are sustainability due to falling numbers and impossible standards. And for this I place the blame firmly on JCQ and the exam boards directed by the departments, plural, of education across Northern Ireland and in the UK. I am very, very blessed and knocked to have a vibrant, energetic languages department, but how can we in good faith persuade a child to continue with a language given the clear lack of a level playing field? And let me give you an example. At GCSE level in 2024, 63, 61 and 46% gave you a grade A in biology, chemistry and mathematics. That was 63, 61 and 46%. 80, 76 and 85% were required for the same grade A in French, Spanish and German. For a grade C in 2024, 31, 29 and 19% were required for a grade C in GCSE biology, chemistry and maths. 59, 52 and 70% were required for the same grade C in French, Spanish and German. I always say, and I've said it in recent years, that the over-focus on the promotion of STEM to the detriment of languages is absolutely staggering, and I'm sure you'll all agree with me. So what can we do to support languages? Firstly, and I'll say this to Lindsay, a curriculum review is long overdue, and new modern syllabi which are fit for purpose in today's world. Secondly, please, Queens, continue to commit to finding the best possible role models in your PGCE, teachers who will inspire and challenge at the same time and in equal measure. And thirdly, address as a matter of urgency the blatant academic imbalance that we have in our examination system, both at GCSE and A-level. And we do have a predetermined curve of grades with the exam boards. I have had the pleasure of teaching so many inspirational students of NOC over the past few years. Students who look out, not look in, and students like Una who wish to be of service to others and make a very positive contribution to our world. And in the future, I very, very much look forward to pipelines, policy and programmes that will reward our students, not penalise them, simply for choosing a language. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for that, Deborah. Disclaimer here, I have a son who is at Our Lady's in St Patrick's College Knock. He is absolutely loving it, and he has really flourished in there and also with his language journey, and they were very supportive when he wanted to switch languages, so thank you for that. Lots of very interesting topics you've brought up, which we will explore during the course of the discussion, so that gives us plenty of food for thought. And you know, for me as well, as a parent and as a professional also, I'm very, very interested to hear more as the afternoon progresses. But without further ado, I'll introduce Hilary. If you want to use that mic, or if there's an issue, feel free to use the podium.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Hilary Woods, Principal of Belfast Royal Academy. I'm the complete oddity in this. I am not a linguist. And I'm sitting listening to all these people thinking, oh my word. My claim to fame was I did French and German at O-level. That's how old I am. So I didn't even do GCSEs, I did O-level. But Belfast Royal Academy was founded in 1785, and there were 4 schools at that time, one of which was a classics school. And I'm proud to say that we still deliver 4 languages, including Latin to A-level, French, German, Spanish and Latin. And we have 46 students studying GCSE Latin, 46. And we have one of our students who has got her offer for an interview for Oxford for German, and another student who's got her offer for, sorry, not offer yet, hopefully they will, but offer for interview for German. So those subjects we know are in demand by the top universities. One of the reasons, I suppose, why I am so passionate about, and I think that was amazing, Deborah, what you said. It articulates absolutely everything that I feel so frustrated about, and Peter referred to it as well. We are so insular in Northern Ireland, and it is so frustrating as an educationalist that so many of our young people get the message that English is enough. And it's not enough. And you've got initiatives in the Republic of Ireland where children aged 8 to 12 from next year will be given 1 hour a week of a modern language on top of their curriculum, and that's in the Republic of Ireland. And then from age, from secondary education on, whilst it's not compulsory in terms of the curriculum in the Republic of Ireland, the vast majority of schools make it compulsory, and therefore you've got 75% of children in the Republic of Ireland taking at least one language to senior certificate level. We do still have a compulsory language at GCSE in Belfast Royal Academy, so we have 200 pupils, 212 pupils and we're still very old-fashioned in Form 4 and Form 5, and every one of them, whether they like it or not, is doing a language. And that's because I want them to be able to apply to universities in Scotland where they must have a modern language. Some of the universities have that as a prerequisite, and some of the universities in the Republic of Ireland have that as a prerequisite as well. So I don't want them to close options off, but like Deborah, I'm increasingly frustrated because it's very difficult to recruit dynamic teachers who will inspire, as Peter has said, and will continue to make the language alive. And the children do perceive a language as very difficult, and actually it's not a perception, it's fact, because those statistics from Deborah are very, very stark. So I know that I've got brilliant pupils in my sixth form, but they know, and I said this over lunch, if they work hard, do what the teacher tells them, they will get their A star in maths, because they will do everything. No matter how hard they may work in their French or their German or their Spanish, there's still such an element of subjectivity around the listening, or around the speaking and the oral component of it. There is no guarantee that those bright pupils are going to get an A star. So if I'm looking after the pupils who are applying for medicine and veterinary and dentistry, they need to get 3 A stars. Now, yes, they have to have 2 in biology and chemistry, but it's very hard to encourage them, as your former student did, Deborah, to take French or Spanish and get an A star in that, which would be hugely beneficial to them, when then they almost, and I'm not deriding the mathematics teachers and the fact that maths is an easy subject. It's not, but they know what they're getting with that. But they know if they do biology, chemistry and maths, they will get their 3 A stars. And that is a huge frustration. And I suppose we've got to get away from this perception in Northern Ireland. Actually, do you know what? English is enough. And if we're trying to educate the leaders of the future, both in Northern Ireland and beyond, we've got to do more. So I would love to see the Department of Education putting in a policy similar to Scotland. Scotland, as you know, have this 1+2 approach. First additional language from P1, second additional language from P5. Why do we not have that in Northern Ireland? I had a young girl who came into me from Norway, and she came into my school. She was staying for a week with one of our pupils, and her English, as you can imagine, 14-year-old, was absolutely perfect. And I said to her, when did you start learning English? From age 6. And it becomes their norm, and it's not, they don't become then self-conscious about speaking a language whenever they get to secondary school, because that's what happens. They start to feel, okay, I can't speak up in front of the rest. So I'm not a linguist, but I'm passionate about languages, and my youngest son did French and Spanish at Durham University. He then did a law conversion course and is now in one of the Magic Circle law firms in London, and I know that his career will be hugely benefited by the fact that he is fluent in French and Spanish. Okay, thank you.
Passion now, so things are like, yeah, it's going to be a very interesting discussion when we finally get around to it. So Diarmuid, if you'd like to, you want to use up here, absolutely.
I think it's better from up there.
Oh, does it? Yeah. You've got
the microphone a bit better? I don't know. Gurmaigat, thank you very much. Sarah and Hilary, impressive French, German, Spanish and Latin. I think there's room for one more in there. All right, we'll talk about that later. So, again, Ursula, my name is Diarmuid O'Bruder, and I am principal of a 9-year-old Irish medium post-primary school called Gael Hollishickera in Dungiven, County Derry. We were founded in 2015 with 14 pupils and now provide education through the medium of Irish to over 350 pupils. We are projected to raise to 600 pupils over the next 7 years. The word Gael Choláiste is derived from the Irish word for the language itself, Gaelic, and Choláiste, or college. Dura has been anglicised to Derry, or in some cases Dura London, or London Derry. I have worked in Irish medium schools for over 20 years, but more importantly, I am a product of the first Irish medium school in the north and was raised as a native Irish speaker in West Belfast by my parents, Donagh agus Myra, who learned the language as adults themselves. They got together with like-minded young couples at the time, bought a plot of land and built 11 houses where they formed the first urban Gaeltacht, or Irish-speaking area in Ireland. That's where I still live. I spent 3 years in Brazil when in my 20s, where I met my wife Alvina, learned to speak Portuguese, and had the time of my life. I joke with those who ask, what language do you actually speak at home? Saying that we speak ABE. Anybody guess what that is? Anything but English. Believe it or not, I have never spoken in English to my children, and they have grown to be confident speakers of Portuguese, Irish, and indeed English. In this company, we are well aware of the cognitive benefits of bilingualism, the additional brain power and the heightened empathy we were all mentioned earlier. We are also aware of the benefits that bilinguals offer the world of innovation, business, and employment. We in the Irish language community feel that there is an added benefit to learning Irish in this place. Seamus Heaney did sum it up when he wrote, "Not to learn Irish is to miss an opportunity of understanding what life in this country has meant and could mean in a better future." Our school motto sums up this view. Dóchas sa dúchas, hope in our heritage. We aim to ensure that our pupils are confident in their identity while looking forward to the future where they can play their part in a vibrant and exciting society as bilingual citizens of Ireland. While I could spend my allocated time looking back at how the Irish language has shaped our society, I would prefer to focus on the better future that Heaney referred to. We have been working to ensure that children in Irish medium schools and others who are interested in developing their ability and interest in the language are provided with a fair share of what that better future can provide. And there is a role for this for further and higher education. Queen's and other universities have realised that degrees in modern languages may be for the few, but joint degrees combining modern languages with other academic disciplines could be for the many. Southern universities have been quick to capitalise. Undergraduate students can opt to take joint honours degrees combining languages with 23 other subjects in Galway, 24 combinations in UCD, and 25 in University College Cork. Ulster and Queen's are following, with both universities offering up to 15 joint degrees for school leavers and others who wish to develop their language skills while following an additional career path in business, law, or accountancy. The future indeed looks promising. From an Irish language perspective, it would be remiss of me not to highlight the fact that the options for combined degrees with Irish, at Queen's in particular, are much less than those available in other languages. It is the case that French can be taken with a combination of 15 other disciplines. Excellent progress, in my view. However, Irish can only be combined with half that number. Crucially, for me as principal of an Irish medium school, areas such as mathematics, law, and physics are not available with Irish. leaving my pupils at a significant disadvantage and my school struggling to find teachers in key subject areas. The higher education sector must help principals like me by training the teachers required for the growing number of Irish medium schools. The better future proposed by Heaney is there for the taking. You might say that we have a penalty kick with an open goal. Let's work together to ensure that higher education meets that challenge and does not, as we say in Portuguese, pisar na bola, step on the ball, instead of scoring the goal. Thank you.
Diarmuid, enjoyed all those sporting football analogies. And when you said ABE, I can only think of ABU, which is not in our house, but in other houses. So that's anybody but United, if anybody doesn't know any football. Yeah, so I think we're really well set up for a very interesting discussion now, which we're going to spend the next sort of half hour on, and then we're going to open up the discussion to the floor and to audience members. We are down a mic, I think, because of the battery, so I think I'll just stay here for the purposes of the chairing the discussion, and we'll share just the one mic between, unless that's a fresh one, is it? Does it work?
Is it a red button?
1, 2.
Yeah, it works.
And the other is, yeah. So
can you try hitting the button on the bottom? Yeah, it looks like it's working. It was working for a second.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not. I have to say that I'm not remotely technical, although that is something that I have had to learn in the course of my career. So I'll stick with the mic here at the podium. So thank you all for that. Really interesting for me as someone who has come to this, relatively fresh over the last number of weeks, doing some research in advance of this. And someone, who would be invested in it, but also, is, not entirely immersed in it, if you like. So I think the best people to begin with in this discussion are principals, because you really are at the forefront or the coalface of this. You've talked about the benefits in all of your opening remarks. You've also talked about the challenges, which are considerable. If you were each to crystallise down, and it's hard because they're multifaceted, but if you were to crystallise it down to one, and what is the biggest challenge facing you each, could you do that, and what support would you require to overcome it, Diarmuid?
Well, I mentioned the pathways for pupils at post 18. For further education, it's really important for us to have vibrant pathways that will encourage pupils to do Irish with other disciplines. And I think there's an onus on universities, and Queen's in particular, to increase the number of subjects available, through combined degrees. But what Deborah mentioned there is really important as well. I think it's the grade boundaries at GCSE and A level are turning a lot of pupils off. Deborah did mention the percentages required to get the different grades at GCSE.
Actually, when you hear it.
When you hear it now, you've heard of the commitments, of being the Irish, being the people who are worst off in Europe, and then the Dubliners and the Northsiders and all the rest of it. But I would contend that the Irish, people who undertake Irish GCSE and A level are worse off than those who actually take, French, Spanish, and German. In fact, a recent study, I suppose 2 years ago, by Desi Tennyson, and Gail Lynn, did an in-depth analysis of grade boundaries, and found, and when you consider that at A-level and GCSE, that all languages follow the same structure, the same questions, the same exam, oral, listening, etc., and that the marks or the percentages that you would get for a B for an A, at A-level French or Spanish, would only get you a C at A-level Irish. So the great boundaries, and it's a testament in some ways to the quality of the education and the teaching of the language teachers that they're actually teaching the language. The pupils are becoming more competent in the language, but they're not getting the recognition for that competence from the examination boards, and I think that there needs to change. Yeah, that would be right.
And like you say, it's not just anecdotal. There is evidence that it is more difficult to get.
Most definitely. Deborah highlighted the differences between some science subjects and languages, and I would then add another facet to that for Irish medium, because as you can see, we're actually educating the pupils through the medium of Irish. You would expect to have more A stars at A level. We do get a lot of A stars at A level, but we don't get enough, and it's harder to get an A star in Irish than in a lot of other subjects, languages included.
So is there a requirement then, I suppose, on the Department of Education, as perhaps one for Lindsay, in terms of the Ofqual report you spoke of that has recalibrated the situation in England and Wales, not so here. And again, as Peter referenced in his opening remarks, that research has not yet been published, or has never been published to date, which would clearly be helpful. So Lindsay, if you want to take that in response, is that something that the department is open to doing, and when will that happen?
Yeah, thank you. And I can say that it is being actively considered in the department. We've just very recently asked SIA for advice around that, and that is with a view to publishing the reports imminently. I think, like so many issues in education, the ones that we're talking about today are reflective of a protracted period of underinvestment in the education system, and an underinvestment in the work that has been required around curriculum, the work that has been done or been needed around looking at our qualification specs and looking at all of the issues around that. And that has been for quite a protracted period, and the minister's on the record around that and around arguing for the need for additional investment. But what we're looking at now, along with SIA, is recognising some of these issues actually require a systemic response. So, for example, through the curriculum review, through a qualifications reform agenda. But while that is the case, we need to identify, are there quicker, shorter term actions that can be taken more urgently to stop the pattern that we're seeing in terms of language uptake, and some of the issues that we're seeing underpinning the decline. So those are the conversations that we're having with SIA right now.
And then what kind of things are you hearing back? How can we reverse the trend?
I think it very much needs a systemic response. And actually the issues with languages we're seeing reflected in other aspects of the curriculum. Mm-hmm. So I could almost repeat the underpinning issues when we have discussions with the IT industry around digital skills, for example. They will criticise the department for the pathways, for the qualifications, for teacher shortages, for curriculum content, and then in terms of how that's delivered. So I think we do need that systemic response, but actually starting from the earlier years. So if we're about generating that love and interest from the earliest age, we need to consider what that means for primary school then. We do need to look at the content of the curriculum. We do need to review qualification specifications, and the Minister has already publicly said he wants a full review of qualification specifications, but he also wants fundamental qualifications reform as well, considering is it still required that we should have GCSEs and A-levels? Are there different approaches that should be taken? But we also need to consider, how do we support our teachers to be highly effective, to encourage our children and young people to want to study languages and to pursue that route. But I think there's a fundamental issue as well that's already been alluded to today, and that's about the societal narrative. That is one that DE alone can't address, because DE is operating in the context of bigger strategic drivers like the skills strategy, for example. The skills strategy has placed a focus, and reasonably so, on STEM and on the digital skills agenda. And those are important, and we're working closely with the Department for the Economy around those. But I have made the points to the Department for the Economy that we need a broader conversation about the type of Northern Ireland we want to create, the type of young people we want to create through our education system, and to speak to Hilary's points about looking outwards and about what we need much beyond the STEM agenda. So I would say that while there are fundamental issues that DE needs to grapple with, there is a broader societal issue around how languages are perceived, how they're understood, and the value they bring to society. I know when I have spoken to businesses, for example, the response I've received, well, we don't really need people who are linguists. So actually, I'd rather talk to you about digital skills in the curriculum. For me, that's a fundamental misunderstanding in terms of the value of languages and the skills and the attributes that we've already talked about today. So I do think there is a bigger conversation that needs to be had beyond schools, beyond higher education, at a societal level around what Northern Ireland is about and what we mean by skills and how we acquire those.
Thank you, Lindsay. If I can bring Emma in now, I mean, is it time that we thought about introducing languages at primary school? Is that something that has been trialled elsewhere? Has it been successful? Because we've heard in the course of this discussion, for many children, the first time they're experiencing it is when they are, 11, 12, and first year. I'm still at the old school, so year 8. But yeah, primary school.
Could I just jump in and just say, for many children in English medium schools, that's
true.
the first sort of time that they encounter another language.
But in
Irish medium schools, they begin at the age of 4 or earlier.
Thank you, Dermot. So just for clarity around that, so they also learn French and Spanish and other languages within the Irish medium. Oh yes, as in yes.
The concept of immersion education, for example, the lady the girl from Norway who came with perfect English, we're doing that here with 2 languages in a bilingual system.
Yes.
And I just think sometimes
that's lost. Fair point. Apologies for that. Yes, but going back then, as opposed to, not in the Irish medium sector, but within the other sector, English-speaking sector, trialling other modern languages in primary school, is that something that we should be doing?
Yes.
And why is that not happening? It's because it's just not.
It's very hard, isn't it? I think a lot of people here have alluded to the fact that we don't have the teachers to teach those languages, and that is the problem. You can have the policy, but if you don't have anyone to actually go into the schools and teach the kids. I mean, just anecdotally, I also have not 3 children, just the 2. Just the 2, and they went to a school in Exeter in the UK. Again, a primary school where there should have been language provision, but it was kind of relegated to a conversational class at lunchtime, and that's the only introduction that either of them got to, and I think it was Spanish rather than French. Because that was the expertise of the particular person at that school. So, I think it's definitely a systemic problem, and I don't think just policy is going to solve the issue. It's a real kind of pipeline issue right through to the to HE.
Yeah, and it's a vicious cycle clearly that needs radical reform. I mean, only recently did I remind myself that it is no longer compulsory to. Except in BRA. It's no longer compulsory to do a language at GCSE, which, when I mentioned that to some friends recently, they were shocked at, because I suppose when it did happen, they weren't engaged with it. They were in their early 20s. And so now they're coming to the point where their children are embarking on this journey and realising, actually, well, it's not compulsory. That seems to be a major part of the problem that we're in currently. So I suppose, is that something that could be done, or has that ship sailed? Hilary?
Yeah, I suppose, whilst I'm listening to what you're saying, Emma, and I completely agree, we've got to find a solution because other jurisdictions are finding the solution, and it surely can be no coincidence that the Republic of Ireland is becoming very strict about this policy, and their economy is blossoming, and they obviously are pushing more and more children. If 80% of their children at the equivalent of GCSE are learning a language, and they have got such a vibrant economy, I'm sure the two must be linked. So if Scotland can do it with their 1+2, if the Republic of Ireland can do it, and I agree with you, Lindsay, the issue is going to be staffing it and so on. But if you asked at the outset, Sarah, what would we crystallise as the big problem? I would say there is no incentive. There is no incentive for our pupils to learn a language here now, other than the Irish medium, as Diarmuid has said. But I think STEM, and I would completely agree with Deborah, the STEM agenda really hit home with parents. And parents would have thought, if my child isn't doing all the sciences for A-level, they're not going to get a job, because the whole issue about the skills that they were developing was lost on many of that generation. So I think the STEM agenda really, really took off. And I agree that digital technology is another issue that within our schools we're struggling with, because if you're a computer science graduate, you're not going to come into teaching because you can be earning about £150,000 as a graduate in that discipline. So, there has to be some way of encouraging linguists to come in and to be the dynamic, inspirational teacher that we all need. So I think it is a big issue, but we've got to work together to try to find a solution to this.
Okay, thank you, Hilary. I guess, Peter, now for your part, are you going to be introducing a private members bill now and reintroducing compulsory languages at GCSE in Northern Ireland?
Hello, is it on? Yep.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll not be introducing a private members bill on that. I am working on a private members bill on tree protections, and I did launch it during the week. Two in one mandate would be a lot. So the will is there. I'm not trying to fluff the answer. Unfortunately, I just don't have the capacity to do that. But I suppose.
But clearly something radical needs to happen in order to reverse what appears to be a decline.
Yeah, it does. And I suppose as an MLA in the Assembly, I can just use my role to keep it on the agenda of the Minister. I always try to talk about the rare opportunities when you get to engage with the Minister. And I always reference Castlereagh, Belfast Metropolitan College. They were consulting about closing potentially. And I used to have the opportunity on a somewhat infrequent basis where I could talk to Conor Murphy during oral questions to the Minister. And Conor Murphy is not an East Belfast MLA, he's not a Belfast MLA. So I was able to actually talk about Belfast Metropolitan College and Castlereagh and put that into his head, watch the expression on his face go from what is going on here, responding to me, but then take that back to his officials to say, what's this guy talking about all the time? What's going on there? You're planting a seed in a politician's head that they're hopefully going to take away and address with their officials. And I suppose I'm going to use what I've heard today to bring to the Education Minister in terms of languages. I've written to Paul recently about are you going to be introducing modern languages at a primary school level? Unfortunately, the most recent answer to me was that he isn't. But it's just about hammering that home constantly. Really quite inspirational points being made here today that we just need to take to politicians and to ministers as well. I don't want to play the political card, but so many times in Northern Ireland we find ourselves without ministers. They are the people that can make things happen. I've seen what it's like whenever they're not in post. Civil servants can't do a great deal without a minister at the helm. I remember last year during the summer, whenever everything was kicking off about Lough Neagh, going to regular briefings with Katrina Godfrey, and she just told us all the problems. These are the scientific realities that we're facing at Lough Neagh. There's not a minister, so we can't do much about that. Thankfully we have a minister with Andrew Muir, and I'm not being paid to say that because he's an Alliance Party minister. But we have a minister in post. They're doing the things that he's doing the things he should be doing. We need to do the same thing with education and really just drive home the need for modern languages at an education level, because with a minister in post we can do so much more than whenever we don't have them. So we need to make sure that we take days like today where we're all sitting talking about the policies that we need to have and get them to where they need to be, to the key people who can make those decisions. at this really important time, because I was reflecting there. I think someone was mentioning about other jurisdictions. I think it was you, Hilary. I was thinking about my own role as infrastructure spokesperson. To compare this to the planning system, which is a really strange way to sort of segue into that, but to compare that to the planning system, our planning system needs changed quite badly, and developers have come to me and said, Northern Ireland just isn't attractive or easy to invest my money into, so I'm going to look at the south, I'm going to look at Scotland. The exact same thing is happening with education. We're kind of getting left behind because decisions aren't being made. But now, hopefully, with this imminent report, I did write down the word imminent whenever you mentioned that, hopefully we're going to start getting somewhere, and we can start to build on the momentum of having an assembly and an executive back.
Okay, thanks, Peter. I just wanted to bring in Deborah ahead of you, Lindsay, just in terms of if you want to pass that to Deborah. Or you mentioned, Deborah, when you spoke here about how imperative it was to have a curriculum review, a modern curriculum fit for purpose to enthuse young people. Tell us what that would look like if that were to happen, or where to begin.
I think, Sarah, we have come up with the idea that this is a new issue, and I would say as far back as 1996, this has been an issue whenever languages stopped being, I don't know the exact date when they stopped being compulsory in Northern Ireland.
2004, I think it was it?
But I remember them being even an issue. I don't think that there's a comparability between Northern Ireland and the other UK exam boards. Mm-hmm. I remember we couldn't get the results at one stage in knock at GCSE, and we transferred to England, and our results all went up one grade for each child. So the comparability wasn't there. I think that children are used to having maybe an easier life now. The idea of having to do an oral, an oral, a reading comprehension and a piece of writing is perhaps beyond an awful lot of them. Mm-hmm. And over the past number of years, languages have become predominantly available maybe in the grammar schools and the selective schools, and other subjects have attracted attention. And I hate to say easier subjects, but I know in my heart that they are easier subjects. And I know that children have an easier life in those subjects. So I think we just have to, I watch the teaching that's done in my school. They're trying to modernise it as much as possible. They're using so many computers, they're using so many apps, and they're doing their absolute best. But when it comes down to it, they still have to learn a verb table, and they still don't overly like that part of it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know whether the exam boards try and make it just more practical, that it's speaking and listening or something. I don't know the exact answer for it, but I would say an average student at A level, my class used to complain all the time because they said 10 hours of homework a week. I would have debated it should have been about 12, but anyway, that was the reality of it. But when they compared what they were doing perhaps for French compared to what they were doing for maybe history, or even maths or another subject like that, it just wasn't comparable. So I think we have to be mindful of what children can actually do in modern age and how much time they're prepared to put into things. They do want an accessibility, and there is an immediacy maybe in our young people at this time that they think that they should be fluent after a day or two in French class. Mm. And I think we have to make them realise as well that, you know, it took them an awful long time to actually speak English. And they have to realise that it will take them 10 years to get themselves to a level in a language, and to put that message out there as well.
And how much of a problem is artificial intelligence and the rise of translator apps and that kind of thing? Are you seeing that already within, your schools, and how big a problem is that? That's something we're going to explore later in the afternoon.
Google Translate was always a problem. I remember a child years ago copying somebody else, and she was a girl, and she wrote Je m'appelle Michael in her French homework to me. So there's always been there's always been that aspect, and people have this over-reliance, I think, on AI and Google Translate, and they just don't understand. The linguists in the room will understand, but nobody else outside this room will get that.
Okay.
I think children in Irish medium schools are getting very adept at finding ways and means to improve their work, or maybe use those. So, for example, we did happen across a certain pupil who will remain nameless who copied an English Wikipedia section and translated it using 365, I think is a better translation app, into what he thought was Irish, but it turned out to be Scots Gaelic. So he was actually caught out with that. So I'm afraid, yes, there are benefits.
pitfalls.
People can learn how to use this, but there are pitfalls as well.
There are. I'm conscious as well that Lindsay have come under some criticism, well, the department, not yourself personally. So, all good to have this conversation and these important conversations. But if you want to have a chance to respond to some of those points.
Yes, and that's absolutely why I'm here. So it's a really important conversation to have. But I think just coming back to a couple of points raised by Peter, I think he said about the Minister not taking decisions. I think it is important to say there's a number of very crucial decisions the Minister has taken that are relevant to this discussion today. So one of the first things he has done is commission a curriculum review that began 2 weeks ago, and he has asked for that to be concluded by April 2025.
And is that across, sorry to interrupt, is that across all the curriculum?
That's a review of the Northern Ireland curriculum. So Lucy Crehan, the author of Cleverlands, is taking forward that piece of work, has certainly been engaging already, and will be doing more of that engagement as we go into the new year as well. So that is relevant. The Minister has also laid out his plan and made it very clear he wants specifications reviewed, and that he also wants to take forward a programme of qualifications reform. I think it's also important to say that the absence of a primary school languages programme also has to be seen in the context of the financial pressures in Northern Ireland that have been well documented. Anybody who has read the Independent Review of Education report will note the annual gap of £155 million to address the per pupil funding gap by comparison to England and Wales. So it is within that context that it has not been possible to stand up a primary school languages programme. So I think it's just really important context. It's not a lack of will. It's due to years of underinvestment across the education system. The Minister's working hard to fight the good fight for additional investment, but we know there are challenging times, so I thought it was just important to make those points.
That's great. I would like now to introduce the floor. If there's any questions from the floor, we have a roving mic for the purposes of that, which Isabel and Janice will use, and if you could introduce yourself in advance of the question and direct it to a member of the panel, that would be brilliant. Gentleman here. Thank you.
Hi, Paul O'Doherty, University of Galway, although originally of this parish, and with the dubious claim to fame of having been the last Professor of German in Northern Ireland when I left to go to Galway in 2014. There's a recent initiative down south, and there was a similar one in the late noughties when I was chairing the Royal Irish Academy's Modern Languages Committee to introduce primary language teaching. But one of the issues back then in the noughties, and I wonder if anyone has any thoughts on how you would make it work, was the continuity piece when they switched to secondary school. So this primary school might offer some introduction to French, for example, for a few years, but the one down the road offers German, and the one across the way offers Spanish, and then they're all going to the same secondary school, and the school doesn't have the capacity to offer a continuity of the French or German or Spanish, plus complete beginners French or German and Spanish for the ones who didn't have it. And ended up, actually, in most of the schools, the default setting was that even though you had done some of a language in primary school, you effectively went back to scratch when you went to secondary school, which was terribly demotivating for the young people. Now, I don't know whether, because I hear a new system is being, or a new project of that nature is being introduced in the south, and I don't know whether they've cracked that nut, or I don't know if anybody has any ideas on how you crack it. It certainly beats me.
It's a great question.
But I think the primary language initiative is absolutely needed, but it's how you make it work all the way through the rest of the into secondary education.
There's the mic. Thanks.
The emphasis must be on the skills and the culture, and the fact that this then becomes the norm. I take your point, and I think a joined up approach is, but in the same way as we almost have that with maths and English, because sometimes we've got children who come to us and they haven't done I know it sounds bizarre, but they haven't done fractions perhaps in the way that they're going to be taught them. So we almost go back to basics with some of that as well. And we've talked around the houses about how do we do that in terms of making sure that what we do in the primary school coincides with what they're doing in the post-primary school. So I think, again, that probably comes back to the Curriculum Advisory Council in terms of what they're doing in setting our curriculum at primary and post-primary level. But I think if there's some way of ensuring that the emphasis is not as much just on the outcomes as on the skills that we've got to learn, as you'd said, Deborah, of the oral skills, the oral skills, the speaking and the listening, and making that the norm, that then, you know, it almost doesn't matter then whenever they do go with, if they're going back to basics again.
And yeah, that idea that, which you mentioned, Hilary, that English is enough, it shouldn't be enough, and that is a cultural shift that will be required. Yes,
I come in there, Sarah. I think that there could be a role there for post-primary schools to play an active role in rolling out such a programme of modern languages in primary schools. I know the 9 feeder primary schools that come to me. You know, why would the department maybe roll it out through the primary schools, build up the capacity in those primary schools, or in the secondary schools, sorry, and then allow those secondary schools to work with their feeder primary schools to prepare children and knowing what languages they have to offer, and offer not only the continuum for language learning, but an easier and smoother transfer to post-primary, etc., to move along as well. Now, it wouldn't work in every setting, you know, you do have selection, non-selection, etc., but certainly in my school, in an Irish medium setting, it could work very well.
Yeah, and that collaborative approach, yeah. Is there any other thoughts on that? Or another question? Thank you.
Thank you. It was really a comment on that from the perspective in England, where we do have primary languages, but there are tremendous problems. There's great inequality in the quality of the provision. Some languages are provided by the classroom teacher who may not even have a GCSE in that language. It's very, very uneven. The problems of transition are immense. So I think one of the problems was it was introduced without sufficient funding, without proper CBD and thinking about initial training, the education. It was without resource and without textbooks and materials and clear specifications, and it has not been very successful. And we have just been going through a curriculum review, and it's just the submissions have just closed. And one of the things a lot of us in England have been arguing for is actually to have something more like a languages awareness programme in primary, so get children to think about what, you know, how connections between languages, how languages work. Oh, you know, French and Spanish words sometimes look similar. Why is that? Sometimes they look like English words. Why is that? How do we get new words? You know, all these kind of awareness things, so that they're then ready to learn a language. It could be in the last 2 years of primary, or it could be starting post-primary. But I think Lindsay's point is absolutely crucial. To try and do it if you haven't got the sufficient funding could be less than beneficial.
Okay,
I think
so potentially more detrimental.
I think it needs to be done with great care. It needs a long run in. It needs training of teachers. It needs materials. It needs specifications. And the question of transition. I mean, some of the secondary schools we're dealing with may have 20, 30, 40 different feeder schools. With hugely different experiences, so that you get some pupils coming in who are terribly frustrated because they're having to go back to the beginning again, others who are lost because it's going too fast for them. They've fallen in love with French at primary and then they have to start another language in senior. You know, there are lots and lots of issues to think through, and it needs a long and careful planning timing.
And the idea of a language awareness course or something like you've mentioned? Has that been trialled anywhere to any degree of success?
So there is a number of research projects and schemes that are being trialled at the moment across England, and I think one of the things that we've been calling for is actually some more research on it, just to see whether that is a better way in. But I think there's a general, all the curriculum review responses I've seen from HE have said that primary is a problem in England at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there, yes, another question from our audience? Thank you. If you could identify yourself, that would be really helpful.
Yes.
And if there's an individual within the panel that you'd like to direct the question to, please do, or if it's just like
Thank you.
Question.
Thank you very much to all the members of the panel. My name is Claire Moran. I'm the head of the French department, or as we say here, subject lead in French. Now, French is one of those subjects which has seen a decline, as you're all very aware of. Now, in languages here at Queen's, we've done extremely well, and just, in first year alone, we've 75 students of French doing all sorts of different degrees. And I just thought I'd mention something about those students, because I feel like I'm a bit responsible because they're not here today. And I was teaching some of them last week, and I asked them, this is a group of about 20 students in a room, I asked them what they thought of the A-level, and how they're finding it here at Queen's. And the one word that came back from a majority of those students who did A-level was boring. And we all know that. It's boring. It's completely and utterly outdated. And it shouldn't be like that. Now, I know I'm talking to Lindsay in particular here, and you know that, I was on the about 10 years ago, I was on a board, I was asked to come in and look at SIA for changing that curriculum. But that pace of change, it's frustrating, you can probably hear that in my voice, and I hate that for our students, that they have to do material at A-level that we would never ask them to do in a degree here at Queen's. They have to come to Queen's to start finding and igniting their passion again for languages. It's deadened by SIA and by those other exam boards. So I would just, I suppose, like to see that. I'm delighted to hear that Mr. Given is going to do some work and have a team work on that. I'm a little bit cautious about how quick that change will happen. I'm sure all the principals are on the same page here, that it's the grade boundaries are one issue, but I think the curriculum really has to change. You shouldn't be asking 16, 17-year-olds to read 19th century novels, and I say that as a 19th century specialist who's written PhDs and supervised many PhDs on 19th century literature, but that's not for a 16-year-old to do and write about it in French. They don't have to do that when they go to university. Why should they have to do it when they're 16, 17? So I think there's just a huge disconnect between the exam boards and the universities.
Okay, so
there's a lot in that, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, there is lots. Is that directed to anyone in particular? Lindsay, yeah, I feel like Lindsay's taking quite a lot of the hard questions today. But yeah, I guess it's about changing the way we teach children and young people and getting to their level to enthuse them to pursue languages.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And you're quite right. And actually, this is why, or one of the reasons why the Minister very early on identified the need for a review of our curriculum and looking at our specifications, because he was hearing these issues, not just around modern languages, but in general. And I suppose resetting the focus around what is taught and how is taught, that is what engages children and young people. So actually it plays a much bigger role than actually just what happens in the classroom. It's what makes them turn up every day and what engages them. And so I agree with you, that is incredibly important. And all I can say to you is the Minister is giving this a priority. He is giving it his focus and his attention. And it is something we will be working very closely with SIA around. I have to say, SIA are an organisation that have suffered greatly as a result of the underinvestment. And that investment piece will be crucial to move this forward at pace. But I couldn't agree with you more around the need for children to be animated and excited by what they're learning. And that is really the outcome that we are seeking through the review of the curriculum and the work that needs done around the qualifications.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. We have another question here from...
Hello.
Hello. If you could,
just,
tell us who you are, first of all.
Yes, I'm Roisin Radcliffe from CCA, the awarding
Oh,
organisation.
yes, well, very important we hear.
Thank you.
In the interest
It would be remiss
balance.
of me not to say just what we have noted. I've been responsible for modern languages since 2018, and at that stage we ran a symposium which gathered the great and the good from everywhere in languages, and we concluded that there was change needed at that stage, and that happened directly after a revision of specifications. Okay. So since then, we have put forward a number of plans. We've also developed a paper on the future of languages, all of which highlighted what needs to be done. So my colleague Barbara is with me today. She's also working in the language department. And we are totally aware of the difficulties for teachers and for young people in engaging with the specifications. We have requested a specification review. And without that, I only think that it will just continue to decline, especially in French, where there's hardly any A-level pupils out there. I have regular contact with the area learning centres, and they have advised that it really is quite dire in terms of the numbers. So going forward, I really think there's a radical need to see what can we do to simplify the A-level. The issue you've raised about the texts that are chosen, but also the fact that the response has to be in the target language, which even the universities don't do, to me seems nothing short of ridiculous. And we have raised this with SIA, we've raised it with the department, and we have also done a lot of research on what motivates young people, why do they do languages. We've done all of that over the last 6 years. And what has emerged there is that young people actually are very open to languages, they love learning them, but there's a need for a real focus at Key Stage 3 to develop an appropriate scheme which will allow them to be nurtured in languages so that they will go forward and want to do the GCSE. Now, at this stage, I'm not sure if it's possible to make the GCSE compulsory. It would seem that would totally improve our education system, because you'll be bringing through young people with the whole range of skills that have been outlined today, and that can only be good. But frankly, I have not been able to get a hearing in terms of taking some of these things forward. We've also looked at the South, and we see how successful they've been in terms of their investment in languages. And meanwhile, another generation has passed through in my time, and I don't know what's going to happen next. There is radical need for a revision of GCSE, for an investment at Key Stage 3, for a consideration of the primary languages and how we do that, looking at other European models, and then for A-level as well to have that revision. And if we don't do that, I think in 10 years' time, we'll be sitting here again talking about the decline in languages, and it really is not good enough for our young people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I suppose on whom does the onus rest then to further progress this? I suppose does that rest with the department to further?
A lot of the outworkings of the report rests with SIA, and Roisin will be well aware of the resource implications for SIA around that are probably inhibiting their ability to act on it.
Okay, yeah. So it's, yes, okay, we'll move on to another question. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Christina Sevdali. I'm a linguist from Ulster, and I wanted to talk a bit about the resources that Wendy was talking about and the discussion that Roisin just raised about scaffolding and helping children in Key Stage 3. We are some of the linguists that have actually worked with schools and produced resources of exactly language awareness and trying to bring the insights from linguistics of comparing languages with each other, talking about historical change in languages. And one of the biggest, and we feel very proud about our resources, and we think we've done a good job, and we hope that we can do a better job. One of the real challenges that we have faced is working with schools, trying to take up these resources, trying to trial them and give us honest feedback and work with us in working with co-creating. And the biggest challenge that we understand is where exactly to put them in the curriculum. We are linguists that believe that to reach the levels that you talk about at A level with declensions and grammars. We've been smiling all afternoon about, to learn to love verbs and to use language properly, you need to understand what are verbs and what they do, and what are articles and what are they for, and what is gender, and what are those weird endings that nobody talks about. And that's what linguists do all the time. And so I guess my question is particularly to the schools, how do we work with each other, the linguists that are willing to put work in understanding and creating materials that we think would benefit schools, and really helping teachers to support and use them in a way that really helps children earlier to scaffold their learning as they're entering secondary schools, with all the issues that we talked about, and the lack of provision in primary, to bring them to the A levels that are so much harder than anything else.
So yes, and collaborating then with the secondary school level. Yes, Deborah?
I think that any school would be open to have a look at something, but I would say, and I probably speak from my languages department, that they are quite proprietorial about what they deliver. They will think what they're actually delivering at the minute is the best that they can find out there. And I have no doubt that they give a very, very good service to our students. They would certainly have a look at it, but it's very, very unusual for any school to just take a programme, perhaps from a university, and say, well, we'll use that in its completeness. I'm not sure if that would be the case for other schools there.
And if it dovetails the GCSE course as well, obviously, because that's what they're aiming towards, is working towards GCSE. But yes, if it's free, I'll take it.
I suppose what we're trying to get at is like making this more accessible to young people and speaking to them at their level. I mean, I did A-level French. I loved the literature side of it, really loved it. But that suited me. My husband did A-level French. He hated that side of it. His teacher, who was French, provided him with VHSs, that's how old we are, of Champions League matches, which he watched at home. I don't know, she played Celine Dion in the class. She can, well, not that he was a big Celine Dion fan, the teacher was. But what I mean is, it's like, making it real for children, because they don't currently see that. They see it as a literary academic thing when it is a living language. And I think that is what we're trying to get across, I suppose. But that's difficult when you're having to then also, grade children in a system. Sorry, that's one of my observations. Yes, any more questions? Oh, Gazella.
I'm happily outing myself as someone who very happily taught at the Belfast Royal Academy a long time ago, and who was very impressed with the standard of teaching and indeed learning the students there. My name is Eskil Holfter. I'm at the University of Limerick. I'm wondering a bit whether the discourse that we have about languages is being difficult and we need to make it simpler and more attractive. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be attractive, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be as engaging as possible. But I was wondering about Mr. Burns. Was Mr. Burns particularly easy, or was he just engaging with you differently? I think if we accept that languages are to a certain extent difficult. No one would question that mathematics is actually difficult for some people and you have to learn it, but you do learn a lot with that. I do think we sometimes underestimate or undersell the skills that we get with this difficulty, with this engaging on a kind of constant level, that you can't cram a language, and that these are the skills that will actually stand you in good stead later on. No one is saying, oh God, so you did biology and chemistry in your A-levels and now you're not doing it anymore, you wasted your time. Yeah. But the same argument you sometimes have with languages, oh, you did French, you did German, you're not using it anymore, so that was a waste of time, wasn't it? So I think we really need to be far more proactive and change the discourse, but also telling the parents, and I think they are in many ways the decision makers, what you are giving your children with letting them learn a language is not just the language, the cultural understanding, the information about history of different people and the different outlook that you gain by that, but it's actually something that will which will give you an amazing advantage for everything. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a kind of, it's about the enthusiasm, it's about the engagement, it's about the lifelong learning.
Yeah, well said, Gazella, yeah. I don't know if anyone wants to respond to that. or in particular, yes, Peter, about Mr. Burns. Still etched in my mind.
I suppose, I mean, we were having this conversation before this started. I mean, I referenced there the film Goodbye Mr. Chips. I mean, he's quite a sort of strict, quite conservative teacher, but he really cares about his pupils. So whenever we'd go to French and he taught Latin, and actually I was going to say earlier on, Hilary, stunned about 46 people doing GCSE Latin. I did GCSE Latin as well, and I did not take it up for A level, but it really helped me in a lot of ways. So he taught Latin, French, and career studies, and whenever he entered the room, we'd all stand up, say our prayers, all sit down, and he would start at the person at the front. And we'd all go through like long paragraphs in English that we translate into French, and everybody would be hurriedly pulling the one that they were hopefully going to get, and then he would say, actually, do the next one there, you, and then everyone's panically going back over it again. But so he was quite conservative in his approach, but he really cares about his pupils, and that activated me personally. But whenever you were speaking there, on my own sort of reflection, I think I learned a lot more, and to come back up to what Claire was saying there as well, I think whenever I went to Queen's, it was quite academic in terms of French, but there was a lot of extracurricular things that I encountered that I never got in St. Malachy's. So we were chatting about ChatGPT over lunch, and I'd said, you can go to ChatGPT and you can type in as a prompt, I really like football, I really like XYZ, give me some ideas into how I can incorporate French learning into this, and it'll come back and it'll say, you could do this, 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 this. And the example that I gave was, I remember a computer lab in the old library in Queen's, and beside it there was the audio-visual room, and it was just full of VHS tapes that I didn't know anything about, and old films that I tried, didn't like them at all. But if I go to ChatGPT, I can use that to find out things that I might like in French, and then that's because the way to learn a language is to immerse yourself in it. You don't just memorize all the conjugations and then you're fluent. It's about finding something you enjoy, translating that into a language, immersing yourself in it so that you're constantly surrounded by it, you're constantly picking it up. I remember I used to constantly look at films with subtitles, and I was chatting to a guy who runs an Instagram account about learning French, and I said, what's the best way to watch a film, the subtitles or not? And he said, no, don't use subtitles, just watch the film, and then you're constantly surrounded by it, you're constantly picking things up. So yeah, a lot of commentary there, but that's about Mr. Burns, and that's about how to learn language, I suppose.
And it's not often that we hear positives of artificial intelligence, but yeah, that's one at a level, you know, to I suppose open up a further,
I suppose, 2005 I went to Queen's, and Wikipedia was kicking around at that point, and everybody was quite concerned about plagiarism in Wikipedia, and people weren't going to pick things up. But actually it's the first step, it shouldn't be the last step. You don't just copy a Wikipedia article and you're ready to go. But it gives you ideas. ChatGPT, you go to it, you ask it a couple of questions, it gives you ideas, things you haven't thought about, that you then go and explore yourself. You know, I use ChatGPT on occasion in French. I'll say to it, can we do this conversation in French? And then I'm able to practice my French. It's not going to be 100% accurate, pretty accurate, but like 95%. And then it's just about being able to use it all the time. That immersion piece is just so important.
Yeah, and control, I suppose, the use of it. We have a couple more questions. Again, if you can introduce yourself, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Fiona Clark. I'm Senior Lecturer in Spanish and Portuguese Studies. And I also do a lot of work with recruitment with my colleagues here. And I think I wanted to pick up just on that issue of the messaging, because there are so many policy things that could take years to start, but the messaging can start immediately. A couple of weeks ago, we had a big festival of careers and languages here. I had over 2,000 students applying to come to the Whitla Hall. We didn't have capacity for all of that, but even from within our own institution, it was hard to get that notice out, that young people from Northern Ireland really want to know about languages, want to know about the skills and the broader skills, which I think will be picked up in the panel after this. So my question would be, and this is partly based off research done by our careers department here, is how can schools get their careers teachers to message this much better in terms of the wider skills? So you may never speak the language again after you've studied it, but you've developed so many other skills through that. How do we get TV to send out the broader message, the newspapers to send out the broader message, as well as within our own institution. We have over 100 students post A-level in Spanish. Nearly 50% of those have A star, and the other 50% have Bs, and that's amazing, in this age where we hear such negative messages around languages. So if teachers would like to give me a practical step that could be taken to help with careers, and I broaden it out to media as well, how can we start changing the dynamic that has been messaged, because there are young people who are excellent, and we don't want to lose them, and our faculty has been very good about supporting us as well. So how can we start that today, off the back even of the following panel?
Thank you. That's really encouraging to hear that you had that response. And also, I think, Emma, you said at the very beginning the interest isn't falling, the interest is still there. So I don't know if any of the principals want to take that. Dermot or Hilary or...
Yes, well, I think, we always say in school, every teacher's a teacher of careers. So we will always have in our departments, every department should have a careers board with the disciplines and the professions that their past pupils have gone into. So in our languages department, they will have the Spanish, the German, the Latin, the French that their students have gone on to do. They haven't all gone on to become translators or teachers, which is where a lot of the people think it stops. They're doing international business, they're doing business economics with a year out. So I think that is certainly something that will encourage, if every school were to do something like that, where have your former pupils gone to who studied at least one language at A-level? Where have they gone on to? Because children do look at that and see, oh wow, that's really useful. And we've had guest speakers, and I'm sure my colleagues would say the same at Prize. We always have, because the BRA alumni is a bit like the mafia, they're everywhere. And you get guest speakers in who will talk about what they learned through their languages, and to be able to say just what everybody has said here, it's the skills that they've learned, not necessarily that they're using it, but the fact that they can communicate with people within business and so on is so powerful. So we use our alumni as powerful role models. Professor Carruthers is on our wall as a role model, because that's really important for us to be able to see, that the pupils can see what somebody who sat in their seats, who did those subjects, what they have gone on to achieve. So I just think it needs to be brought back to ordinary people like them have used this language in a really, really positive way. So yeah, I think just everybody recognising the role that they have as careers teachers.
I just to endorse what Hilary has already said, and when we do our subject selection, there is a big push in our school for languages, for choosing for GCSE and for A-level as best we possibly can. I think we need to work on persuading the parents. I see a real connection in my school, and I am embarrassed to say that I have taught so many way back in the 90s, and now their children are coming through. And if their parent did languages in the 90s, invariably they are actually taking up a language themselves. And I see languages in families throughout my school. Every member of the Mullen family, for example, all did a language. So it's about trying to convince the parents, more parents, I think, because people are going for an easier life and they're going for an easier option, and it is much, much easier to get a grade somewhere else. And I have to say that my parents and my children in school are quite grade driven. So there's an awful lot being done in school as best we possibly can. We're trying to have all the trips. We were in France, Germany and Spain last year. We're doing exchanges as best we can, and there's so much going on, but there are competing factors, I think, across the board.
And Dermot, would you like to add anything? Sorry, I'm conscious I haven't heard from you.
Not much to add, but I would say from our perspective, we've worked a lot with trying to get the careers service and the Department of the Economy, who I think is responsible for careers advice, to take on board the fact that, in our case, Irish and indeed languages in general, have a lot to offer to the world of work, and to advise students that they can have career paths through choosing a language, etc. So while schools can do so much, there has to be a sort of a policy decision at a much higher level that will provide the incentives, and the advice for parents and for pupils.
Okay. So any more questions? Oh, sorry, there's one at the back.
Yeah, thank you. David Carruthers, headmaster of Coleraine Grammar School. We're typical of many provincial grammar schools in that we've about 1,000 pupils. Numbers taking French and Spanish in our case at GCSE are very, very good. But then, like a lot of schools, we've got a big drop-off in sixth form. And really, from a school's point of view, I think that's where we fit in. It's pretty obviously where we fit in, doing what we can with the resources we can to keep as many pupils in languages post-16. So like many schools, we work very closely now with a school in Spain to help encourage pupils in Spanish. And we also are now well involved with the Queen's mentoring scheme, working with our GCSE pupils to encourage post-16 as well. Lindsay, I want to say thank you to you. First of all, I'm sure you remember coming out to our school last year in a different area. If you could move quickly on the report that's been mentioned, Peter mentioned at the beginning, that off-call report links in with the numbers that Deborah mentioned so clearly. A lot of what's been talked about here today are long-term solutions, which are going to take resource and policy and changes, which naturally take time. That is a relatively, I wouldn't say easy, but it's a relatively short-term step which could be taken and really should be taken. It's long-term overdue. That would help us make a real impact on the numbers staying in for sixth form. Second thing is a question. It's a bit of a what-if question, but it relates to what Hilary was saying about how our pupils will, in the vast majority of cases, they will choose their A-level subjects in terms of what's the outcome going to be. If I know I enter A-level chemistry and with a certain level of GCSE, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get an A star or an A or B. That's my ticket to whatever. Same thing in many, many subjects. And as we've talked about a lot today, there's a huge uncertainty around languages. Big problem, and this is the what if, the huge problem, if it's 1 in 3 subjects, that's a very high stakes. What if it was 1 in 5 or 6 or 7 subjects? I studied 4 science, maths, A-levels. I would love to have kept on English and French, for example, but that would require a very different approach at post-16 education, which you mentioned curriculum review, Lindsay. We ought to be thinking really differently like that, and we don't maybe have to look too far to see possible ways of doing things differently.
Okay, thank you very much for that, David. And yes, one more question before, I think, because we're just checking on the time. Thanks very much, Dermot.
This is Michael Coleman, one of the 1776 professors of French, although I haven't been around since 1776, a more recent appointment. But it's probably more of a comment than a question, and it's to do with the fact that, you know, we're now in a very rapidly changing geopolitical context where the Anglophone world is becoming a very cold place. You know, if these tariffs are introduced, there's a trade war and so on. And so I think any economy that puts all of its eggs in the Anglophone basket is heading for trouble. I think that, you know, for all of us in the island, what's really important is that we kind of diversify so that economically we're in a position to be able to respond to what will be rapidly changing circumstances, and the kind of, you know, the trading partners that we need may be very, very different down the road from the kind of trading partners that we you know, have at present. So I think to some extent what has tended to kind of dictate the English-only policy is the kind of the heady days of globalization, the 1990s, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the notion that a particular kind of Anglophone globalizing economic model would become the dominant one. But that's changing rapidly. We're heading into a very different world. So if we want to kind of future-proof our educational systems, I think that's one of the things we've got to do, is to think about the absolute necessity of different languages. And I also think that, you know, one of the things that we can link it to as well, which we haven't really talked about to date, and it's the biggest existential crisis facing us here on the island of Ireland, is the climate crisis. And one of the key arguments that's made in the climate crisis is the importance of biocultural diversity. Is that how you respond to things, you know, how you respond to threats to your water system, to your landscapes, to your rivers, to your seas, is that you have sets of arguments, ways of thinking about your rivers, your mountains, your forests and your seas differently. And the more languages that there are, obviously is an absolutely key role in terms of the Irish language, but the more languages that you have, the more potential sets of responses you have to deal with. And what is true of indigenous cultures, you know, throughout the world is equally true of the island of Ireland. So I think, you know, in terms of changing geopolitics and the question of biocultural diversity, languages can be absolutely centre stage.
That's great, thank you so much. I think checking on the time, we're probably best wrap now for now, ahead of our well-earned coffee break, and having been given some well-earned existential thoughts for to discuss over coffee, that would be great. So we'll take about half an hour, come back here about 4 for our next panel discussion, which is called Future Proofing, Contribution to Culture, Society and the Economy. So yeah, see you back here about 4 o'clock. Thanks very much. Welcome back to this very special event here at Queen's, celebrating and reflecting on 250 years of modern languages. We had a really insightful first discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed it, so thanks to our contributors for that. Now into our next panel, it's Future Proofing, Contribution to Culture, Society and the Economy. And joining me for that are Professor Wendy Ayres-Bennett, Emerita, University of Cambridge, Associate Fellow, Institute for Languages, Cultures and Society. Claire Nicuri, translator at Le Conseil de l'Union Européenne in Brussels. Elena Torres, editor at Hatchet Publishing. Chloe Olsen, PMO analyst at Siena Global Telecommunications Company. And Jamie Shilliday, Global Sales Manager at Micro Focus. We had hoped to have Claire Hanna MP, the SDLP MP for Belfast South and Mid Down, to open our discussion. But she has had to attend Westminster today for the vote on the proposed law on assisted dying. So she is unavailable. She's unable to be with us today, unfortunately, but she does send her apologies. Instead, though, we have 3 wonderful students who are going to provide us with some insights. Extremely fortunate that we were able to secure you at short notice. They're going to give us a brief presentation on the benefits of their time abroad, an international immersive experience central to all degrees involving foreign students. This period spent in the Gaeltacht Hour, also for students of Irish. And our students are Alexandra Stafford Santana, Hannah Wilson, and Myra Catch Ni Wahana, and they join us now. Ladies, if you want to come to the podium.
Hola a todos y a todas. Sí. Hola a todos y a todas. Me llamo Alexandra, estudio antropología y español y el año pasado estuve viviendo en Avilés, en Asturias, que es una región preciosa en el norte de España. Fue un año increíble que me ha dejado con muchas ganas de volver lo antes posible. Durante el año trabajé como auxiliar de conversación en 2 colegios de educación primaria. Fue un trabajo muy divertido en el que desarrollé mis habilidades lingüísticas, personales y profesionales. Acabé siendo una persona más independiente, optimista y organizada. A lo largo del año viví sola, pero nunca me sentía sola. Hice amigos con unos estudiantes en Avilés y con los profesores de los colegios que me ayudaron mucho, sobre todo al principio cuando tenía que adaptarme al nuevo entorno. Mis colegas también me recomendaron muchos sitios espectaculares donde visitar en la región. Algunos de ellos fueron Cudiero, Lastres y Ribadesella. Asturias tiene una gran industria pesquera y estos sitios son algunos de los pueblos bonitos que se encuentran en la costa. Una de las ventajas de ir a un sitio como Asturias, que no tiene una tasa de turismo muy alta, es que acelera el aprendizaje del idioma castellano. Y esta experiencia de aprender un idioma va a ser muy diferente según donde vayas. Por ejemplo, en Asturias hay aspectos del dialecto asturiano que influyen en el castellano, pero esto convierte el proceso de aprendizaje en uno que es muy interesante. Y me demostró que la lengua de un país no es todo lo que se lee en un libro. También una parte fundamental de llegar a dominar un idioma es la exposición. A lo largo del año aproveché de los días que tenía libres para visitar otras ciudades en España. Unas de ellas fueron Barcelona, Málaga y León. Lo que más me gustó de visitar estos sitios fue que me dio la oportunidad de probar varios tipos de comida y aprender sobre las diferencias regionales. Todo esto me ha servido mucho durante este último año de mi carrera y me parece muy valioso poder aplicar lo que aprendí el año pasado en mis estudios universitarios. Espero que este resumen muy breve os haya dado una idea de cómo fue mi año en Asturias y de las diferentes oportunidades que se presentaron a lo largo del año. Fue la mejor experiencia de mi vida y sin duda voy a volver, porque Asturias y los asturianos ocupan un lugar muy especial en mi corazón. Gracias.
todos, chamo-me Hannah e no ano passado eu passei o meu ano no estrangeiro em Portugal e na Costa Rica. Foi provavelmente o melhor ano da minha vida e vou falar agora do meu tempo em Portugal. Então, nos primeiros 5 meses eu morei no Porto, uma cidade no norte de Portugal. Frequentei a Universidade de Porto no primeiro semestre, ou seja, de setembro até o final de janeiro. Estudei na Faculdade de Letras, que se chama QUB, e tinha 5 aulas diferentes. A minha aula favorita era francês, A1, e para mim a universidade foi um bom sítio para fazer amizades, praticar o meu português e, sobretudo, aprender mais sobre a língua e cultura portuguesa. Em pouco tempo fiz amigos e adaptei-me ao modo de vida português. A minha experiência no estrangeiro teve um impacto enorme nas minhas competências linguísticas, mas também me ajudou a melhorar as minhas capacidades de comunicação e a minha confiança em geral. Desenvolvi-me muito como pessoa no ano passado e aprendi tanto sobre países e culturas diferentes. A cidade de Porto é incrivelmente bonita. Tem 6 pontos impressionantes que atravessam o Rio Douro e a vista sobre a cidade ao pôr do sol é espetacular. A cidade também tem muita história e quando estava lá visitei o Palácio da Bolsa, o Mercado de Bolhão e a Estação de São Bento, que é Património Mundial da Unesco, e também o Monumento Nacional. A minha parte favorita da cidade, no entanto, é a Praça Ribeira, uma das zonas mais antigas da cidade. É também Património Mundial da Unesco e um testemunho das origens medievais da cidade. Tive também a oportunidade de viajar por Portugal. Visitei Lisboa, Braga, Guimarães, o Algarve, algumas outras cidades mais pequenas e as Ilhas dos Açores. As Ilhas dos Açores são um lugar único no meio do Oceano Atlântico, com um sotaque português muito diferente do sotaque de Portugal continental. Para terminar, não quero demais salientar o quanto gostei da minha estadia em Portugal e o quanto me beneficiou. É difícil começar a aprender uma língua do nível de iniciação na universidade e os 5 meses que eu passei em Portugal deram-me a motivação para continuar a melhorar as minhas capacidades linguísticas em português. A única coisa má do meu tempo em Portugal foi não ter podido ficar mais tempo. Muito obrigada.
Bonjour tout le monde et merci de me recevoir. Je m'appelle Marie-Kate et j'étudie le français et l'espagnol. Maintenant, je suis dans la 4e année de mes études et j'ai donc beaucoup de travail à faire cette année. Aujourd'hui, je voudrais parler un peu de mon séjour à l'étranger à Tours, en France. J'avais beaucoup de chance d'y étudier, étant donné que je n'avais pas l'occasion de voyager quand j'étais plus jeune. Je voulais donc profiter au maximum de la ville vraiment pittoresque de Tours. Ce qui est drôle, c'est que j'ai rencontré mon ami Thomas, qui est originaire d'Orléans, dans un bar irlandais. Grâce à mon nouvel ami, j'avais eu une expérience culturelle authentiquement française. J'ai même eu l'occasion de partager un repas traditionnel avec sa famille. C'est une expérience très enrichissante pour moi, et vu que sa famille ne parlait pas d'anglais, mes compétences linguistiques ont donc été mises à l'épreuve. De plus, j'ai voyagé dans la région locale et j'ai visité des petites villes belles, pleines de culture et d'histoire comme Blois, Chinon et Orléans. Pour moi, la situation était parfaite. J'habitais à environ 2 heures de Paris en train et j'ai profité de l'occasion de visiter régulièrement la capitale. Alors que la majorité des personnes trouvent que Paris est vraiment cliché grâce à des séries comme Emily à Paris, pour moi, c'était magnifique. Voir les lumières scintillantes de la Tour Eiffel pour la première fois avec mes meilleurs amis a été une expérience inoubliable. Au moment où j'avais vraiment l'impression d'être le personnage principal dans le film de ma vie. Le temps que j'ai passé à Tours m'a vraiment changé en tant qu'individu. Avant mon séjour, je n'avais aucune confiance en moi ni en mes capacités. Cependant, j'ai aujourd'hui un nouveau sentiment de liberté grâce à mon stage, car j'ai désormais la confiance nécessaire pour voyager, travailler et vivre seule. Je me sens désormais capable de prendre des initiatives, de relever de nouveaux défis, de résoudre des problèmes avec confiance et facilité. Je suis devenue une personne infiniment plus flexible et spontanée, ce qui m'a permis de rencontrer de nouvelles personnes merveilleuses d'origines diverses. En plus de cela, j'ai également amélioré mes compétences linguistiques, mais mon expérience immersive était bien plus profonde que cela. J'ai pu acquérir une nouvelle perspective en adoptant un nouveau mode de vie et une nouvelle culture. En bref, je considère qu'un stage à l'étranger est une expérience formatrice essentielle pour n'importe quel jeune, étant donné qu'il a changé le cours de ma vie pour le meilleur. C'est un véritable privilège d'avoir vécu cette expérience et je suis enthousiaste à l'idée de ce que l'avenir me réserve dans mon aventure française. Et voilà, merci beaucoup.
Well done, and thank you so much to Alexandra, to Hannah, and to Myra Catch. Yeah, that was really wonderful to hear, and to hear all of you from, especially in your respective languages. And yeah, for my part, I suppose Myra Catch, and for all of you, that it really was on my year abroad in France that I really then learned how to even speak French, like properly, I suppose, and it was only then that I really, became, I suppose, fluent, which I've since lost, but perhaps I'll pick it up. Maybe it's in there somewhere. I'd like to now bring in our panel members. If you could all introduce yourselves, tell us about your background, your experience of languages, and how they've been beneficial in your sphere of work and in wider society, really. And if you can share the mics, as we did before, between yourselves, that would be great. And I guess we'll start with Wendy. Thank you, Wendy.
Hello, everybody. I'm delighted and honoured to have been invited to be with you this afternoon. I'm Wendy S. Bennett. I'm a Emeritus Professor of French Philology and Linguistics at the University of Cambridge and an Associate Fellow of the Institute of Languages, Cultures and Societies. I think my greatest claim to fame today is that I taught Janice French linguistics from the beginning right to being her PhD supervisor. So I'm enjoying basking in her reflected glory this afternoon. And some of the people here are my intellectual grandchildren as well, so that's really great. From 2016, I was principal investigator on a major AHRC-funded project, a £4 million grant called Multilingualism, Empowering Individuals, Transforming Societies, which brought together people from the Universities of Cambridge, Nottingham, QUB and Edinburgh, really to try and promote languages and language learning across the 4 nations of the UK. And as part of that, we had a strong policy thread. And Janice and I co-organised 3 policy workshops and wrote 3 policy briefings on education policy in the UK, on languages and social cohesion, and on languages, trade and business. I currently have a Leverhulme project to write a book on UK language policy, and another project funded by the MHRA trying to create short, readable summaries of research for policymakers. When I tell people I'm writing a book on language policy, often their reaction is, the UK doesn't have any, does it? What are you going to write a book on? And I guess if you compare it to the French situation and politique linguistique there, it is a very different situation, and I was reminded of this recently. I had the good fortune to be invited to the French Academy to see the 9th edition of its dictionary being presented to Macron about 10 days ago, and Macron at that stood up and spoke for 15 minutes about the value of the French language, both within France and in the broader world of francophonie. And we're not at that stage in the UK, loin de ça, but we do have a language policy, albeit often hidden in legislation about other things. Alongside that research and theoretical work, I'm doing a lot of practical work on language policy. I'm particularly working with the Cross-Government Languages Group and its academic engagement subgroup. And what we're trying to do is find ways to better get research-informed evidence into government. And to give you some examples, recently I've curated workshops for the Home Office, with the Department of Health and Social Care, one for analysts across government, and most recently one as part of Devolution Learning Week, where we did a session on the minoritised regional languages of the UK and their value and importance. So I'm doing lots of policy work, but I should say my heart and my passion is still with French and French linguistics.
Thank you, Wendy. Claire, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yep. Hello, Jim Tasha, Gurtamil Moiga Visan Kurdu, they live in you. So thanks very much for the invite. I'm very happy to join you today and take part in this highly interesting discussion. So my name is Claire Nicruri and I work as a translator at the Council of the European Union. I work in the Irish Language Translation Department. We mainly translate EU legislation and we primarily translate legislation that is drafted in the English language. After that, quite a bit of legislation that's drafted in French, and then sometimes we translate from other languages as well. My language journey began at Thornhill College in Derry, where in first year I started learning French and Irish and also Latin, and all three I thoroughly enjoyed. There's quite a big tradition in my family of studying French. My sister is an associate professor in French, and my mother studied French, and I have aunties who were French teachers as well. So that was the first language, I suppose, that I really fell in love with. But to be honest, later in school, I continued doing French and Irish up to A-level along with English as well. And I think at some point during A-level, my passion for Irish grew a bit stronger, and something clicked with me when I was doing A-level, and I understood that I just felt more at home in speaking Irish than I did French, and it took on a greater significance for me. So then I came to Queen's and I did an undergraduate degree in Celtic Studies and French, which included a year abroad in France as well. I also got to study a bit of Italian in first year. Doing Celtic Studies, I was able to do Welsh and Scots Gaelic as well, which was also really enjoyable. I think one of the things about languages for me was it wasn't just like academic study. I find languages really enjoyable. I find them to be really fun subjects, and they open a real social and cultural life for you as well. Languages aren't just a subject that you study in school. It's more like a way of life. Like I have a really enriched social and cultural life, particularly due to Irish language. I'm very heavily involved in Irish language music, and I attend Oireachtas na Saoine every year, and different cultural events throughout the year. So after I did my undergraduate degree, I did a master's in Irish Translation Studies at Queen's also. I think at the time that I lacked the confidence to go on with work in translation. I had done a bit of freelance translation work, and I lacked the confidence to pursue a career in translation. So I did some media work for a couple of years. Irish language programming primarily. I was like an Irish language advisor on quite a number of programs, and I got to interview people. I also did voiceovers for animated cartoons and films as well, which was brilliant, which I loved. And I also got to do singing on a lot of these things as well, which is my other big passion in life. And I definitely believe that I wouldn't have got that opportunity to do that if it had been in the medium of English. So there's a definite added advantage there of having the Irish language. Then I did teaching for almost 10 years, mainly teaching in Irish medium secondary schools in Donegal, and I taught a bit in the north as well. I have to say I preferred the education system in the south for a number of reasons. I liked that to me, I found it to be a bit more of a traditional education system, which was more similar to the education system that I had grown up with. There's a much greater emphasis on languages. Irish is compulsory to Leaving Cert level, of course, and then you also have to have a second modern European language for quite a number of the universities in Ireland as well. So then a lot of opportunities were coming up in the EU because there used to be a derogation on the amount of documents that were translated into the Irish language, but there was a push in the EU to get to have Irish on par with the other European languages and have the same amount of documents translated into Irish. And the aim was to do that by 2022. So from about 2016 onwards, there was a big recruitment push and there were fantastic opportunities that came up. So I started preparing for competitions and entering competitions, and then I managed to get a job with the Council of the European Union, which is where I have been now since 2018. Okay, thank you.
That's brilliant, Claire. It's a rich, varied, and exciting career. Elena?
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me. My name's Lena and I'm an editor and I work at a publishing company in London called Hachette. Normally, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that editor, probably reading by yourself all the time, editing of course, but it is really like a people-facing business, which I didn't really expect even when I got into it. And my language skills have been so important in that respect, which I'll talk a wee bit more about later. In terms of my language skills growing up, I was lucky enough to grow up in a household that was English and Spanish speaking. And then I went on to do French at university with beginners Portuguese. I think I was actually the first one and the only one in that year that did French and Portuguese at Queen's. And I went on to do a Master's of Research in Languages as well. And it was because of my French that I actually got my first role in publishing. Queen's was one of the universities that took part in a thing called the UK Goncourt. And the Goncourt in France is like our equivalent of the Booker Prize. So this was the UK edition of it, where they let UK students pick their French laureate. And I was one of the representatives from Queen's, and I got to go to London and meet all these people in the publishing world who work with translated fiction, etc., etc. And I got talking to someone there who needed French readers. So I had a very cushy job while I was doing my master's, really, reading French books and writing reports on them for international publishers. So it wasn't just about the skill of having French and being able to read the book. It was also about having the understanding of what would work in foreign markets. And it was from there that I went on to work at a press for translated fiction called Mountain Leopard Press. And we published, Norwegian thrillers and French literary fiction, Spanish coming of age, and it was an amazing experience. Because of my language skills, I was able to often read the books in the original language before anyone else had a chance to, because some other people, of course, had to wait for English translations, or they had to wait for their readers to write reports. So it was a nice skill to have, but I will say that really what has come in handy for me in my job generally now is having presentation skills, being able to persuade and convince, because so much of my job is convincing people to invest in ideas and in books that they perhaps have never read. I have to go into boardrooms with 100 people and say, please buy this book about this couple who fall in love and travel the world. And they think, well, why do we want to do that? We've heard 100 of these. And you have to convince them that, no, this one is different and we have to spend some money on it. And also, it would be remiss of me to leave out that the high street is struggling at the minute. Books are getting expensive. People are buying fewer and fewer books. We have to look outside of the UK to see how we can make money in books, and that is often in our international markets. Germany is probably our biggest, and we have to have an understanding of the world and cultures and ideas to say, right, I'm reading this book, I want to buy it, but will someone in Australia want to read it too? So yeah, it's been a fantastic experience, I have to say. And now I'm working in a press that is more generally crime and romance, but those skills will, I'm sure, serve me for a long time in my career.
Yeah, no, fantastic career to date. Elena, and just reflects how versatile and flexible and all the opportunities that come from a language degree and being fluent in languages. Chloe?
Hello, thanks for having me here. I'm Chloe Olsen and I studied French and Spanish and then did a Master's of Research in French at Queen's. After uni, I worked as an export sales executive for a food production company. I worked for the head office and sold for most of their sites in the UK. Most of my customers were in the UK, but I did have some in France, and I was there for just over a year. Now I work as a PMO analyst for Sienna. It's a global telecommunications company, so they help customers build their networks. I'm on the services team, so I create reports and I look after customers, and really I was brought in to support French customers, and I've been there for 8 months now.
Okay. And could you, for those who don't know what a PMO, like what you're an analyst of?
So
you write reports.
Yeah, people ask me this.
Okay.
I'm like, I'm not too sure. Pretty much I'm there for revenue reports, but I'm sort of going more into sort of customer success advocate work, which is looking after customers. So I do a bit of everything.
Okay.
That's what analyst is.
Okay.
But yeah, I know languages have been really useful in my roles. The main thing is communication. Most of my customers can't really speak English, so how would you get anything done? Yeah. Then when they knew I could speak French, they felt comfortable coming to me and trusting me, and that then leads on to building relationships in sales. It was so helpful because the price for a product would be something that morning and be completely different by the afternoon. And if I'm sat in an office, I don't know what's happening, and I could then go to these customers who I had a relationship with and say, how's this product doing? What do you think is going to happen next week? And I could get ahead of what was happening out there. And even in my current role, customers can come to me and tell me what's going on, and I can resolve it before it becomes a bigger issue. I'd also say confidence. When you're learning a language, you have to put yourself out there. You have to do that to improve. And I find it easier approaching people, and that's all I do in sales and customer service. And I think as well, being one of the youngest ones in both companies, you want to kind of stand out, and you're with these people who've been there in the company longer than I've been alive, so you want to kind of stand out. So yeah, it's been really beneficial.
Brilliant, Chloe. Yeah, that confidence piece is probably critical actually for all jobs, and if you're getting that early on in your language journey, then it can only stand you in good stead. Jamie, you're also in sales. Tell us a bit about yourself.
I am indeed, yes. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Jamie Shilladay, and I am a sales manager with OpenText Micro Focus. We are a software company, one of we are the seventh largest pure play software company in the world. We joke that we are the largest software company that nobody knows, because very few people in the room, I'm sure, have heard of OpenText or indeed Micro Focus, as we previously were known. I lead a team globally based out of Belfast, and out of the Belfast office within my team, I am responsible primarily for Western Europe within that team. I have managed teams throughout the rest of the globe, and languages are a critical part of my recruitment strategy. But not only that, I'm a languages graduate from Queen's back in 2001. We will not dwell on that point, but my languages actually, rather disappointingly, are no longer taught here. So I'm a German and Italian graduate. I have also picked up bits of French and Spanish, and it was wonderful hearing the Portuguese as well from the girls earlier on. There's 19 different languages that I would hear on a daily basis in the Belfast office, and it's vitally important for us to have good language graduates, people that have the experience of going out and spending time in different countries, experiencing different cultures, building those relationships, understanding how to think critically, and have developed that self-confidence and that wherewithal that comes from spending time communicating in different languages, experiencing different cultures, and being able to bring that into the workplace. one of the key things for us is that it gives you a way of problem solving that you don't necessarily get from other skills. So it's something that is critical for us in our business. I personally wouldn't be in the job I'm in if it wasn't for my languages, because I was hired to sell into the Italian market, and very quickly I was the only native English speaker on the team at the time, and I ended up moving across to look after the UK market. And after 3 years of that, an opportunity presented itself to move into management. And ironically, from being hired because of my Italian, I now use my German on a daily basis and my Italian on a once every 6 months basis. That being said, a prime example of where the language skills come in was one of my team had a meeting with a new partner who was looking to sell our products just last week, and she asked me, could I jump on a call very quickly to introduce myself to that partner. And very quickly, within 2 minutes of hearing them pitch to me why they should be a partner, I responded in Italian, and suddenly the entire complexion of the conversation changed, because I could speak their language quite literally, and that made a massive difference into building the relationship with that new partner, and that's a huge advantage when we sell to end customers as well. So languages are a critical part of our success.
Thank you, Jamie. And what exactly is it you're selling? What is Pure Play?
So,
is it like gaming?
No, when we say Pure Play, it means we only sell software.
Okay.
We don't sell hardware or anything like that. So it's entirely software. Okay. And we're primarily document management, but literally you will not know most of the time that you're using our software. So if anyone in the room has taken out cash in the last week, you'll actually have used our software. You just won't know about it. We are in most of the day-to-day applications within banking, insurance. When you get on a plane, somewhere in the background there is some of our software. It's in the background mostly.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, everyone. Just, I suppose, for me, from hearing all of that, just shows, like I said about Claire, all of your jobs, just how, rich, versatile, varied they've been. I think, and the transferable skills as well are huge. I think we'll begin in a wider discussion now with yourself, Professor Wendy Ayres-Bennett. Wendy, with economists in RAND Europe, which is a non-profit policy think tank, you published a major piece of research on how language skills benefit the UK economy. Clearly that is really critical if we're wanting to harness that going forward. Can you outline the headlines of those findings, and really how do we ensure that those reach government and the wider public?
Thank you very much. I'll do my best. So, first of all, evidence suggests that learning additional languages enhances human capital, and what that simply means is that multilingual individuals have the potential to earn higher wages and have better labour market outcomes. The evidence is quite good for this across Europe, including in Ireland, and in the US we have studies again showing this. One study showed 2% premium for speaking an additional language at work, for instance. The UK evidence is a bit more mixed, and there are various reasons for this. We think partly it's because UK employers undervalue language skills still, but there may also be a mismatch between the language skills that we produce and what employers need, so there are some issues there. The second, and perhaps I think more interesting set of findings, is that languages play a really significant role in international trade, and not sharing a common language acts as a trade barrier. We looked at international bilateral trade flows between a very large number of countries, broke it down into different sectors, so agriculture, mining and energy, manufacturing, services. And we found that sharing a spoken language can reduce trade barriers and so increase trade. And this seems to be particularly in mining and energy, but more importantly for the UK in services. And you know that services are very important for the UK economy. So UK exports are predicted to increase if there's an increase in the number of languages spoken shared with the trading partners. And our study estimated, and I say our study, it was the Rand economists who did the heavy lifting on this, but our study showed that a full eradication of language barriers with Arabic, Chinese, French and Spanish-speaking countries could increase UK exports by around £19 billion a year. Next, we examined the effects of extending languages education, and we found that just a 10% increase in the UK Key Stage 3-4 population, so that's kids aged 11 to 16, following an intensive Mandarin programme, so that they could use the language later in business, could improve UK's GDP cumulatively over 30 years by between 11.5 and 12.3 billion, and that's equivalent to about 0.5% of the UK's GDP in 2019. So again, it's significant. And if we had more pupils engaged in that would increase. That was just a 10% increase. And we got similar economic benefits for learning Arabic, around the 12 billion, French and Spanish around the 9.5 billion. Finally, we set the costs, the magnitude of those estimated effects against the cost of achieving them. So how much does it cost to educate the kids? And we found that investing in languages education will most likely return more than the investment costs, even under very conservative assumptions. And broadly speaking, what we found was that for every £1 you invest in languages education, you get £2 back. Okay, I'll just say that again. For every £1 you invest in language education, you get £2 back. And that's only looking at the people, human capital and trade effects. That's not taking into effect all the other benefits, the community cohesion, defence diplomacy and national security, health and well-being, and all the other things that we've heard about so far. So there's a strong economic case, which I think we need to get into government. We've been doing that with some success in Whitehall. I don't know about the extent it's getting into the devolved nations, but I think it's also important to get that into business, because I think certainly my side of the water, there's not necessarily appreciation of language skills, and we need business to invest in language skills, and we need to value them in recruitment and promotion and career structures. So there's a lot to be done.
I'm actually really surprised that your research showed that employers don't value languages. That really surprises me, actually, as someone who's just heard that.
I think it depends a lot on the sector. I think there are other studies looking at SME, small and medium enterprises, and they say that they think they would like languages, but they don't know how to go about it or what to do. I think there's a range of opinions, but certainly we felt that some of the reason why UK graduates weren't necessarily seeing the same wage premium was because there wasn't the same valuing of languages. And it's very striking. There's a new in the industrial strategy. There's no mention. The first thing I do when I get any new policy document is type in languages. Absolutely no hits for foreign languages at all. Nothing in the industrial strategy. Skills agenda, virtually nothing. It's just shocking. These have to be part of the skill sets that we value as a nation, and we need to get them across government.
So there's clearly a serious piece of work needs to be done to really get the wider message out about the value of languages? I mean, within this room, obviously, we're all going to value them, but it's getting that message out beyond here.
Yeah. So some people say to me, why did you do something about the economic case? And, my personal reason is you do languages because it's fun, because it's culturally enriching, because it opens new doors, because it makes you see the world through different eyes. But if we want government to invest in languages and we want to empower departments of education, I think that we need the support of a wide range of ministries and departments. We can't expect education to do it on its own. We need investment in languages education because we need languages and those intercultural skills across a broad range of issues. And we have to keep making this case. We need it for policing and organised crime. Much of that is international. There's the dark web that needs language skills. We need it for social cohesion and the integration of refugees, migrants. We need it for health and well-being. We need it for international development. We need it for international relationships. We need it for the UK's place in the world. There are almost every ministry and department we need to make the case the language skills are vital. Yeah. And I think that would perhaps help. I don't know, Lindsay, looking at you, I think that might help your case.
Well, I think the headline for me is that every pound invested in languages returns £2 back to the economy. So that's the bottom line, really. And with a better economy, it benefits us all. And so, that for me is a takeaway. Claire, you're an Irish translator at the Conseil de l'Union European Union, the Council of the European Union. Clearly, your language skills are core to your everyday job. Thinking more broadly in the European Union beyond the posts of translators and interpreters, what you do, presumably languages are important or critical, a bit beyond for many roles.
Well, just even speaking from the point of view of the careers in any of the European Union institutions.
Yeah.
And a lot of there's some advisory bodies as well where this policy also applies, but you need to have at least 2 EU languages, EU official languages. To get a job. Just simply put, you're not going to get a job in an EU institution unless you have 2 EU languages. A lot of the posts as well specify that you need to have fluency in 3 EU languages. Some of the posts as well specify that you have to have a third proficiency in a third EU language to get. I'm thinking in Irish now. A promotion.
Yes, upgrade.
So I mean, that's applicable to all the EU institutions. You absolutely have to have at least 2 EU languages.
And it's a normal part of, I suppose, society there, and I suppose for Europeans as well, it's just normal that they have more than one language.
Yeah, well, even in Belgium itself, in Brussels, where I live, most Belgians can speak. They can speak 2 or 3 languages easily. It's such a normal thing to be able to converse in. The Flemish speakers, for example, have excellent English. The French speakers as well have excellent English, and you find that French and Flemish-speaking Belgians converse with each other in English most of the time. Living in Brussels, you hear a variety of languages every day. It's a priority for people who live in Brussels in particular to promote languages and teach their children as many languages as possible. I have a 2-year-old son who I speak to in Irish, so I'm bringing him up in Irish, and then his family here would speak to him in English, and his creche, they speak to him in French, and he also has Flemish-speaking relatives, and that is a completely normal thing in Brussels. I was actually worried about at one stage that he wasn't picking up languages because he wasn't saying much, but it's been shown that they will be able to express themselves in all these languages. It might just take a little more time, and even speaking to his creche workers, they said this is completely normal. That all the children at the creche are in the same boat.
He is only 2.
Yeah, I know, but I suppose you want them to walk quickly and speak quickly.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. Elena, for you, actually getting your job, was your job at Hachette? Hachette. I was going to say Hatchet, which is the wrong pronunciation. Hachette, was that your first job after graduating, and how did you go about actually getting that job?
So my first job was an internship at a scouting company called London Literary Scouting. So I started working for them on a freelance basis, and then secured an internship, which is often what happens in publishing. You kind of have to work your way up from the ground and do internships, etc., etc. So it was working at the scouting agency that I networked then into an editorial assistant position at a press for translated fiction. And I just wouldn't have the job I have today if I didn't have those language skills, because unfortunately publishing is just so competitive, and they get thousands of applicants just for one post. You have to be able to show that you have some other different skill, whether that be languages or something else. And it was how I managed to get in there, was through translated fiction, and that opened the door for me.
And from graduation to your current job, how long did you freelance for? Or?
I only freelanced
a couple of years
during the year of my master's degree, and then a bit more after that, and then the pandemic hit, and I got my scouting internship remotely. So I was working for London Literary Scouting in Belfast, and then moved to London when I got my editorial assistant position.
Well done. It was a relatively short period, or
I suppose so. And it was really, the girls were talking about the year abroad and the independence and the confidence it gave you. It was because of those personal qualities that I developed that I was able to move to London and it not feel like a big deal, because I had moved to France and set up a bank account and found accommodation when I was completely on my own. So it really helped.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And funny, I did make note of those things that Myra Catch was saying, taking your initiative, new challenges, solving problems, flexibility, spontaneity, all those things which languages give you, that probably until now I didn't really appreciate fully, that they helped even me in my career journey. Chloe, it is increasingly normal for people to work across a range of organisations, throughout their careers. You said you previously worked in export sales, you're now in Siena. Do you think you would have got your job had you not had your languages? Clearly not.
No, I don't think so. Because when I applied for my first role, they could have took someone on with more experience, but they needed someone who could speak a language. And then going on to my role now at Siena, I remember in the job description it said, French speaker, but someone with a finance or business degree, which I don't have. But I think it's easier to teach the business side of things than a language. Even the person, there was someone in the role before me in my first job, and they'd been in the industry 4 years, and they were put through some French classes, and I think they learnt a few words, and the numbers, say prices, but that didn't really get them too far, But definitely languages have got me in there, and the opportunities I've had since then, I've worked with some big customers, like I'm helping with Formula One at the minute, and I've got to travel. I've been to France, I've been to Germany, so I don't think they would have took me on unless I had those languages.
Yeah, that's interesting, that actually having it as a foundation, set you apart actually, and that you were able to perhaps pick up on the other skills more easily. And you would concur with that, would you, Jamie?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
From my own experience, when I graduated, was faced with the choice of, do I go and learn other skills outside of languages, or do I teach? And I think that's what a lot of languages graduates face the dilemma of whenever they graduate. And part of that, I think, is down to awareness of what the language skills can actually do in the workplace. And I didn't use my languages on a daily basis for a number of years, but I always knew that I had spent the years learning the languages and spending time abroad, that the skills that they had given me were going to pay off in the long run. So I went and worked for various other companies first to get the business background, and then when the opportunity presented itself, I actually nearly didn't apply. And my sister, who's also a languages grad, she said to me, "Why not? This is perfect for you. You have the sales experience, you have the languages that they're looking for. Put your name in the hat at the very least." And it would have been a huge mistake if I hadn't. And that's 15 years ago. So.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Do you think there's kind of almost a reluctance sometimes with language students to apply for certain things, or to because you really are putting yourself out there when you're speaking a different language? Not only are you being judged on your presentation skills, you're being judged on your linguistic skills. So there's, perhaps it comes back to that confidence piece as well, Claire, that you mentioned, that you didn't, although you clearly were on paper perfect for those jobs, it took you a number of years to build up the confidence that actually I can get that job, and maybe we need to be more open in how we teach it to encourage that discussion and the talking more openly, and that we can not be afraid to make mistakes in how we are speaking, I suppose, the language.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple of points that I would pull from that. And so number one of the things that we look at, and Chloe hit the nail on the head here, was you can put people into the role and try and teach them the language based on their business experience. But in actual fact, the language skill is the foundational piece.
Yeah.
So I like to call it hire the attitude and train the talent. And by that I mean, make sure you've got the base foundational skills for the role. But if I need to teach someone how to sell, I can do that. I can't teach them the language because language goes further than words and sentences on a piece of paper. It's an experience, it's communication first and foremost. And that's from spending time with people, spending time in the country, spending time communicating with others. And so much of communication is non-verbal as well. And as an Italian speaker, one of the first things you pick up on, and I'm sure everyone in the room knows this, you see something like this and you see, that is Italian. That is part of the language. I once saw a car accident when I was living in Turin, and I could tell you exactly what was being said. And I was in a car 100 meters away, but I could tell you exactly what was said because every word was accompanied by a hand gesture.
Yeah.
And that's an experience. That's part of learning languages. That from an IT perspective, there's a lot of talk about AI. AI can't learn that. People can. And for me, that is something that people won't talk about. But that is a personal and interpersonal skill that we require. And when I say we, I mean not just as a company, but as a community, as a society, we need to have those skills.
Yeah.
And it's vitally important.
I guess it brings us very neatly onto artificial intelligence and the threat that it poses to jobs within the language sector, I suppose. Sorry, if this is Claire or if one of the. Do you want to take that, Claire? Is it used within the European Union already, and how have you adapted to it?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that AI in translation is advancing rapidly, and we do use a lot of machine translation, and a lot of the time it's very accurate and very helpful indeed for more, I suppose, technical terminology. And because we've such a big database of legislation documents, it's quite helpful in that respect. But anytime we translate anything communicative, anything for I'm going to say CEO Gracing, the website, anything, any publications, any communicative material. Basically, machine translation fails miserably in those cases. Also, it can throw up really random examples when you're translating as well, and nobody really understands where the machine translation got this bizarre idea out of. So, I mean, I suppose our roles as translators are developing a bit and becoming more, we're becoming more editors with some of the documents we translate, but you do have to have a very thorough knowledge of the language you're translating and what you're translating from, and be very careful that what you're getting from the AI, the results are accurate. So it is coming in, it is present. It's going to become more present in our career as well. But I suppose there's a lot of discussion about how we're going to be pilots of AI in translation in a lot of ways in the future.
Okay, and Elena, for you in publishing, how is it being received?
Yeah, it's complicated because we have seen that people are trying to use it to cut corners and save money, but actually readers don't like it, and this is fundamentally a business of readers. So we know when we look at an AI cover of a book that it's an AI cover of a book. It lacks humanity, and we see that in translations as well. Sometimes I get emails from publishers and a book has only been out for 2 minutes in France. And the email comes in and says, please find attached the full translation. Red flag already. And then you read it and yeah, all the words are there and they're accurate, but it's just wrong. There's fundamentally something not right about it because it hasn't been translated by a human with thoughts and feelings and emotions that can capture, the poetry in language, not just the words themselves. So I'm very against it in translation, and I don't think that there's a place for it in novels. That might change as AI becomes more human, quote unquote, but I think we still have a long way to go before that happens.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you so much. I think we should move on and leave time for questions from you guys in the audience. And again, if you'd like to identify yourself and direct your question to one of our panelists, please do so. Thank you. Is there anyone who'd like to? Yes. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. If I may, I'd like to, Chair, thank you very much for this wonderful event. But if I may, I'd like to return to Wendy's very, very, very key point about making the economic case or the careers case or the business case or the future economic survival case around languages, and how difficult that is despite a lot of the evidence that you raise. And I'm speaking as somebody who's in the South, who works in the South, who has seen this evolve over the years. And in a period after our economic crash, 2008, 2009, there was a view that, yes, languages, intercultural skills, the global economy, that was going to be essential. And in the last 5 or 6 years, I can see in the public documents, and I follow these, the public policy documents, I can see a drifting away from the desire of the employers to make that case strongly enough or in a way to convince the decision makers, the fund deciders, the funding deciders. And the question is how is it done? But it's vital that it should be done because everybody's agreed that it's needed. And I was going to turn to the point that was made here about AI, and that kind of follows on from that. The difficulty at the moment is that whilst we all agree that AI has huge imperfections, the fact is that all of the decisions, or so many of the decisions at the moment, are being made around education for AI, the importance of AI, and there's many soft voices that are saying, oh, well, with AI, we won't need languages, and that voice is actually filtering in to the decision-making sectors, and that has to be a concern. So I don't know how to resolve, how do you resolve this? But I just wanted to thank you, Wendy, for raising that so strongly, because I think it's absolutely vital. And I think in the South, we can see, the issue of decline of language learning is very strong. It's happening. The statistics of the South are showing what's happening. Despite great efforts being made, And I think we do have to work on that because, you know, the parents, the students themselves, the future workers, they want to have a future which is going to be good for them in many respects. So how do we make that case? And I didn't know about your work, Wendy, but I'm going to look it up when I go back.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Wendy, if you want to
I've got a few
copies,
not the full report because that's very long, but of an executive summary if anybody's interested. Yeah, a few things. I mean, I think one thing to say about AI is that a lot of them is based on large language models. Linguists are really important here. Linguists are really important for explaining when and how to use it ethically, and so on. And so it's not just about post-editing in translation and so on. There's a fundamental role for linguists and linguistics in that. Getting the message across. I mean, it's the sort of things that we talked about in the first session, really, isn't it? It's about getting the message into schools and parents that often, if I did a linguistics open day at Cambridge, a 17-year-old comes and say, I really, really want to do linguistics, and the parent would be behind and say, well, I don't really want them to do linguistics because what are they going to do? What career are they going to do? There's nothing you can do with linguistics, right? And so, there's a lot of education to be done around languages. I had the good fortune to present the case to languages some years back now to all the permanent secretaries at Whitehall. The first thing they said to me was, well, we won't need you because there's now Google Translate. I mean, that was the initial reaction. And my response was, yes, but what you get as a linguist is that intercultural competence. It's that's really important. That's what we're talking, that's what the business people are talking about here. It's not the words on the page. It's not just the fact that you can string a few words together or you know how to conjugate verbs. It's having those deep cultural insights. It's knowing what works. It's knowing how to behave, what the pragmatics are, how to greet people properly. I'm started to learn Mandarin, and one of the things we were taught was how to hand over your business card in a Chinese rather than a British way. There's these things which are really, really important, and we need to stress that it's not what a machine can do, it's more than that. Can I throw something back at you, Claire? I mean, one of the things that we would like is for the media to do more for us. What can the media do for us? We need some prominent public figures we need people like Brian Cox, we need these popular figures who pick up languages, but we try constantly to get languages into the media, and actually we don't get a lot of
pick up on that. Well, probably because it's probably not going to grab many news editors in a news meeting. To be honest, I will try my best in going forward to try and sell the story, because ultimately that's what I would have to do in a news meeting. Is like, I've got a news meeting full of news editors who want to know, well, are people going to watch this? What relevance does this have? And perhaps as well, from UTV's perspective, a lot of our audience perhaps wouldn't be the same. I mean, it's hard to say. But going forward, sitting firmly on the fence here, I do think there is definitely scope to explore this further, having spent this time today just really understanding how important it is for us going forward, as human beings and societally as well. So I do think that's something we should really be doing more of. And
I mean, if you had thoughts about how do we make it more sexy? One of the things that I had said was, why don't we have something like, equivalent to the Great British Bake Off for languages, or you put people in I don't know, a room and you know, you do a Big Brother experience, but they will have to learn another language. Or, you know, why can't we do these things? How can we grasp
I think it is purely
the interest?
It perhaps hasn't been done before, so thank you for that suggestion. And I will work on my pitch when we leave here. But yeah, no, they're clearly, there definitely is a role for us to play in that. But I mean, so I guess for me, coming to this relatively fresh, albeit with a background in languages to a point, some of the stuff you've been saying to me was completely new to me. And I mean, I was saying that Janice, that 2004, that really that languages were no longer compulsory up to GCSE here in the UK. I was really staggered about that, and clearly that had come out in under the radar when it was of no relevance to me at that time, because I had my degree, I was embarking on my career, so it wouldn't have been on my radar. But I think that is probably one of the reasons why we're sitting in the position we're in now, that we don't have you know, a pipeline of students who are, you know, linguistically capable, and it's all those other transferable skills that it gives you that I really hadn't properly thought about until now. So yeah, I will do my best going forward to yeah, make it. No, it's I can just always use the disclaimer that, you know, I'm not meant to have an opinion. I'm just meant to just sit on the fence and see both sides of the story. But yeah, is there any more questions? I've taken some of your time, Robin.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, and just to carry on the thought actually about the AI, and mention my name's Robin Hickey. I'm a professor of law at Queen's, but I'm also Dean of Undergraduate Education for Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences. So I support schools and departments to develop programmes and support students with general upskilling in between the curriculum, and that means I spend a lot of my time now worrying and wondering about AI and its impacts. And actually, and without wanting to be too sanguine about it, I do think there's an opportunity here as well, and that actually part of the challenge is about getting the machines back in their box, actually, and thinking about how they can help and what their place is. I think the concerns about large language modules are well taken. I think that translating apps and generative AI is never going to be a substitute for first principles language understanding, for the kinds of humanities skills that the panels both have been describing this afternoon. But I do think there's things that they can help with that we haven't been able to do before. As Peter McReynolds was mentioning in the first panel, ChatGPT can converse in languages reasonably accurately. And the ability for young people studying, you know, preparing for GCSE orals or whatever, to rehearse with the machine and to have instantaneous calibrated feedback targeted to individual words that they're not pronouncing in the way that the machine thinks is totally accurate. I mean, that's potentially a game changer. It's never been easier for young people to access content in different languages, or with varying subtitles, or with varying dubs. So I think there's a real opportunity here, and actually the challenge for educators at all levels of the system and for education policy experts is to address your concern and not let these things unfold in a vacuum, but work out what the machine is for and what it can add to the discussion. I don't think that we can shy away from that, because we either step into that space or the message comes out that there's alternatives to learning languages from scratch, and that seems to me what the real risk is there. So I might turn it back and say, there's never been a more exciting time to think about how to help young people acquire languages.
Yeah, that's fair points, Robin. Yeah, and I like the idea of keeping the machines in their box. Any more questions?
My name is Brendan Sadler. I'm a PhD student in French and a former primary school principal. And just on your comment about the media, I'm researching la langue française in Ireland, and one of their very prominent teachers for a very long time, from the 1920s through the 1960s, was called Mademoiselle Marie-Thérèse Giudicelli, and she was one of the first broadcasters on RTE radio. It was 2NR, the first radio station in the south in Ireland after partition, and there were 15-minute slots for French, German and Spanish, and she was responsible for the French content. So maybe that's something we could go back to the future.
Yes, I'm not sure on TV that's the same, but no, quite. I mean, conceivably. I mean, I think it's fair to say that Dermot, there's a huge Irish language sector, and it's growing. You know, I think it's important we stress that. So not that it's anything that I've been involved in, but like that is a huge sector that is growing. There's lots of scope within that, and jobs and all that kind of thing.
Certainly what, you know, what's the name? Sorry.
Wendy.
What Wendy was saying about the media, Irish
Yeah.
language. Well, Irish is in a different kind of position than global languages like French and Spanish and German. We're a minority language, but we've had to look very closely at how to make Irish sexy.
Yeah.
And you know, if I had told you, you know, a couple of years ago that I had a few past pupils who got together with their mates and are sort of doing a wee bit of rap in Irish, and you know, you probably would have said, what the hell, like. But if, you know, if I said to you, have you seen the QUB movie, it might just change, you know, that kind of perception, you know. So, you know, we've had to work hard at trying to make Irish, you know, sexy. TG Cahir has helped a lot. We've had, you know, people, you know, spending 6 months in the Gaeltacht learning Irish and having their sort of, you know, journey followed. Like Des Bishop did a very good set of programs a number of years ago, you know, along stuff like that as well. So we have been very innovative, and we've had to look at those kind of things, like, you know. So it's just hard to, you know, bring sort of you know, the French languages or the other Mandarin and the other languages into mainstream media. And in some ways, I would say that probably the BBC is a wee bit better at that. But if we're talking about the global services, they certainly have their Irish language programming doing very well, and they have Welsh, etc. I do hear some Arabic going on as well. So, you know, maybe take that back to UTV and see how that goes, you know.
I'll take it back to ITV, whom we're owned by. But anyway, I was wondering at what point we could introduce QUB, but I think at 5:15 it's probably okay. No, well, I mean, actually, in all seriousness, I watched the movie a couple of weeks ago. I thought it was excellent. I thought it was very moving. It kind of, and aside from the kind of other very controversial elements of drug taking within it, I mean, how much do we need to get back to making this, you know, connect with young people, which is clearly what QUB has successfully done. I don't know to whom I'm posing that question, but.
Sorry, I digress. When I was asking you to make that comment, I digressed from my original question, which was really the point has been made this morning and this afternoon about parents, and encouraging parents to motivate children. And I am somebody who, at post-16, I had to leave languages behind and concentrate on sciences. But over the years, I've benefited from the outreach from the likes of what was Biffy, now Belfast Met, and the Language Centre at Queen's, and also my interest in the Alliance Française, where I did exams down in Dublin, which led to where I am, what I'm doing now. But I just wondered what the panel maybe thought of is it not important to push these sort of opportunities for people later on in life to rekindle their love of language and maybe pass it on to their children?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's never too late, as they say. Yeah, I don't know, Claire.
I'll just mention.
I think it's
you have to tap them off.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of opportunities in the European Union to increase your language proficiency. There's a few people mentioned they went on Erasmus schemes when they were students. One of the things that the European Union also offers is this Erasmus Plus programme, which I only found out about when I started working for the European Union, and that is a scheme to allow professional people working in education and sport to go, and with youth as well, to go somewhere in Europe and train people there or exchange good practices, teach in a school abroad for a while. And I don't think people here were ever really aware of the Erasmus Plus programme.
No, not aware of it. Something I'm going to apply for the minute I leave here. Yes, any more questions from the audience?
Just very briefly, because I know that people probably want to get home. But we were talking about AI, and I know there's a lot of sort of scare tactics around it, you know, the robots are taking over. But in a way, it's just really another tool, you know, and we just need to, it's there. We're going to have to work with it. It's in the workplace. And I think so long as students are taught how to use it properly, to be the boss of it, as opposed to saying, sure, AI will do it for me. So there's that proofreading and that's rigor and the critical thinking. That's where it's at. I believe that technology offers us wonderful opportunities that we have not yet properly harnessed. We talked about Erasmus. Sadly, I think what's the statistic? Less than 20% of students are in the position economically, socially, whatever, to be able to avail of that, the actual real thing. So what you can do instead is, within Erasmus, virtual exchange. And this is within the reach of most people. So virtual exchange, I'm sure you've heard of it. You have also a thing called blended exchange, where you start off online, you get that into that comfort zone, and then that instills in you the appetite for the real thing. So there's so much we could be doing at all levels, primary, secondary, we're already doing it at third level, but not enough.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, thank you. And actually on that point, my daughter goes to a local primary school here and came home, and they've also been doing Mandarin within their primary school, which I was completely astonished by, but yeah. So yeah, it is happening. I would assume that's the exception rather than the rule, perhaps also because of the school that she's in, but yeah, I was impressed by that. Yeah. Is there any other questions? No? Everyone's keen to wrap up and yeah, Wendy.
I was just going to say one of the things we haven't talked about much, and Janice is an expert on this, is home heritage and community languages. I think we should perhaps just say that that's a tremendously rich resource that we have.
What is that?
So that's the languages of the UK, so whether it's Polish or Urdu or
Irish.
Well, it could be Irish, but lots of languages that are spoken. I don't know what the comparable statistic is in NI, but in England, 1 in 5 kids starting primary school has a home language other than English.
Yeah.
So it's not it's a minority, but it's a really significant minority, and this is a kind of untapped resource that the UK has that we really need to use. Within government, I mean, the civil service are not using and exploiting those skills, but it may be, I don't know what the makeup of your child's primary school is, but maybe there are the Mandarin speakers.
Yes, there are.
And,
quite a few.
And actually trying to use the language skills of the kids that are in the classroom is a really valuable resource and a really great springboard for learning another language. And I think often in the past, having a native speaker in the classroom was thought to be a bit of a nuisance or a threat or a problem. But if you can use them instead as a resource and build on their kind of what we call metalinguistic knowledge to learn other languages, then that can be a really great way of showing the value of languages and celebrating people's own culture and identity. So I think that's something that we should also kind of bring into the mix when we're thinking about.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, and to celebrate them, rather than denigrate them. Sorry, was there one more? Yes. Introduce yourself as well, please, if you would. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Leanne Henderson. I'm a lecturer over in education here at Queen's. I was just wondering, Wendy, or any of the panel, if you'd like to speak a little bit about the socioeconomic disparities in language continuation. So we know that kids at like Key Stage 3 are kind of enjoying languages, they're having a lovely time, but when it comes down to making the decision about continuation, that there are social factors at play.
So kids from less privileged backgrounds aren't taking languages beyond a certain level,
Precisely.
which needs to be addressed, absolutely.
Does someone else want to
I don't
speak?
know, it's not beyond my remit, but yeah, clearly that's a significant problem.
So, I mean,
the
evidence is
thing.
really, really clear.
Yeah.
The more socially disadvantaged you are, the less likely you are to have access to good language teaching, the less likely your outcomes are going to be successful, the fewer opportunities you have for travel, and it's a really marked problem, and it's one of the points that we're trying to make to government, that there's a real inequalities agenda here that has to be addressed. And there are other inequalities. I mean, one of the things that is also known is that boys don't engage with languages as well as girls, and there's been lots of work about getting girls into STEM, which is great, and I'm absolutely behind. My college in Cambridge is an all-women college, and we really try and promote women in STEM. But we need to do something around boys and languages as well, and make it cool for boys. It's sort of as a girl's subject, and somehow not suitable for boys. So there are lots of inequalities there that are urgently need to be addressed, and we hope that in the curriculum review, and I hope in the NI curriculum review too, that this will be something front and centre. And that also means, I think, changing the curriculum to make it more accessible, bringing in a broader range of cultures and experiences, and not just being accessible to the better off pupils who have the luxury of being able to travel. My own language learning experience, I had none until I was 11 when I started French. But I just didn't travel abroad at all because I had a disabled mother, and we didn't go anywhere. It wasn't we didn't go to France, we didn't go anywhere. And it was only when I was old enough to go on my own that I started doing it. And it's so transformational, and we have to find a way for allowing kids from less well-off backgrounds to have that excitement, because that's one of the things that turns people on to language learning, right? Isn't it? Just to go and to be able to be somebody else. I mean, I was a terribly shy teenager. I'm still quite shy, despite appearances. And I actually liked the fact that when I went and spoke French, I could actually be quite confident and different, and no one really knew what my background was, and I wasn't that kind of geeky girl that liked languages and things at school. So,
Yeah, I think that's a really lovely way to round things off, and how just transformative an experience it can be for all of us, and we're all, go out and evangelise now beyond these four walls. Is there any more questions before we wrap up? Any more? Yes, Claire. I thought you were going to give us a song.
Well, maybe I'll do that later on after.
Because she's a brilliant singer. I know that as well.
No, I'm just thinking that's a good point, that there should be some kind of bursaries or scholarships available to travel abroad and get a language learning experience, because that is without a doubt the best way to learn a language, the immersive experience. I think everybody here agrees with that. There are quite a lot of bursary opportunities that exist if you study Irish and you want to go to a course in the Gaeltacht. So I know people who were at school with me who had never been on holiday, and they couldn't, their family just didn't have the money to take them anywhere, and for a lot of them their first holiday was a trip to the Gaeltacht to learn Irish.
Brilliant, that's great. Yeah, maybe I'll be taking advantage of one of those as well. We're going to wrap then. I think we're all going to, we're 5:30, we're just 2 minutes to go anymore. Trying to squeeze in anything. I think we're good.
I still have the microphone, which could be great or could be dangerous.
As long as it's within 2 minutes, work away.
Well, I just wanted to say that listening to you all speaking earlier and the amazing experiences you've had in your careers, that we need to, bring you back much more often to speak to, our own students here at the university, but also to younger students. Because you're all genuinely just so inspirational that you couldn't help but enjoy or want to study languages. But I suppose what we find in our research is that, you know, while young people are enthusiastic, that actually they're making quite informed decisions. So we kind of need to press those policy pressure points to make sure that things are working in a way that young people you know, will find palatable, i.e. if they can achieve a good grade in comparison to their other subjects. So I think that that's really important, and I'm so pleased that so many of you have come here today who have decision-making power. So yeah, let's continue the conversation.
Great, well thank you so much. Yeah, we've got time for. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all the contributors. I've thoroughly enjoyed being your host. I've really learnt a lot. Organisers are grateful for the support of the Faculty of Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences, the School of Arts, English and Languages here at Queen's. Thanks also to the members of the 250 Years of Modern Languages Advisory Board, chaired by, how do you pronounce your name, Gisela? Gisela, and the next event will be hosted at the University of Limerick and Mary Immaculate College on the 20th of November next year. For now though, we hope you all can stay, have a chat, even a glass of something. Yeah, thank you again. Good evening and bonne soirée.